a month or more of the season, so we're off to a great start. The metaphorical shit has already hit the fan. But here's the thing. You've got a ton of fantasy-relevant storylines throughout the entire league. Will this quarterback play? Will that quarterback be allowed to play? Is this quarterback going to suck as bad as he did last year now that he's on a new team with his old offensive coordinator? The list goes on. And what about so many of these other running backs coming back from injuries? Quarterbacks, wide receivers going to new teams. I'm going to cover what I think are the top 7 fantasy storylines heading into training camp for the 2021 season. And listen, I can't hit on everything. I hope you understand that. But I do have videos on so many of these other topics, like will Saquon Barkley be back at full strength heading into the start of the season? What should we expect from Dak Prescott? And so much more. So check everything out on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Once you're done with this one, let's dive into it. But before we do me a solid. If you enjoy these videos, you think they helped you, hit that thumbs up. It's huge for us here at Awesemo. Subscribing to the channel as well. Help us hit that 5,000 subscriber mark and continue to grow this channel so we can keep putting out great free content. Let's do it. The Steelers have definitely been one of the more difficult teams to figure out this offseason. So hopefully we'll begin to get some answers in training camp. Ben Roethlisberger's coming off a season where he attempted 608 passes and threw for 33 touchdowns while finishing as the QB 14 on the year. But things unraveled late in the season as the Steelers dropped 4 of their last 5 games after starting the year 11-0. Here's the thing, though. Pittsburgh had a really easy schedule during their winning streak, but they also got absolutely screwed by COVID-prompted rescheduling, having to play 3 games in 12 days and 4 in 20. That's a ton. Roethlisberger couldn't have looked worse as that grueling schedule came to a close, but 2021 is a brand new year, even if he isn't getting any younger. I'm actually not even here to talk about whether or not I think Big Ben is going to have a big year. And I mean big from a fantasy perspective, if you know what I mean. But more so to talk about the huge discrepancy in where he's being drafted compared to the rest of the Pittsburgh offense. Check this out. Najee Harris has a second-round ADP, despite the Steelers' offensive line still projected to suck. While Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster are all being drafted inside the top 7 rounds. Roethlisberger currently has an ADP of 193 as the 27th quarterback off the board. So it seems like there's a clear disconnect here. Let's see what this team is looking like over the next month and maybe start fine-tuning our decisions. So the question is, if this entire Steelers offense is being drafted inside the 7th round with confidence, shouldn't Ben Roethlisberger be getting some more love? Or are we just overvaluing this entire Steelers offense for 2021? It's got to be one of them. I'll leave the answer up to you. No one wants to talk about the Jets because, well, they're the Jets. But you couldn't count on one hand the teams who have more question marks on offense than New York heading into training camp. Actually, you might not be able to count a single team that has more uncertainty from a fantasy standpoint than the Jets. First off, the backfield, a total unknown. Michael Carter was drafted in the 4th round and has an 8th round ADP in fantasy, despite having no idea what his workload is going to look like. Tevin Coleman's being drafted 7 rounds later and followed both his head coach and offensive coordinator over from San Francisco. Could he be the week 1 starter? Right now, I'd rather take my chances on Coleman as a super late round pick with very little risk. There's also LaMichael Pirine and Ty Johnson, whose roles are clearly undefined as well. And what about the pass catchers? Corey Davis signed a 3-year, $37 million contract this offseason and is coming off his best statistical year as a pro, posting 5 games of 100-plus yards in only 14 starts while averaging 10.9 yards per target and 15.1 yards per reception. Yet he's being drafted behind rookies.
Sure. It's good to know. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive, presented today by one Jock Market. I am Eric Lindquist. I will be hosting this lovely thing. On the other side of us, we got Adam Scherer in the middle of a nice sweat here for the early slate. We'll see if he can stay focused here for a little bit. But Adam, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty good. Hoping that the Reds stop hitting like now. But other than that, yeah, doing pretty good. Early slate's looking okay. Excited for another 5-gamer tonight.
Yeah, I didn't even remotely look at anything in the early slate. It's all yours to win. How about that? I'm going to just focus on this 5-gamer. I'm excited about it. I hope you guys are too. The money spends the same, whether it's 5 games or 14 games. So we're going to get down to business here. Of course, it's going to be very, very quick, but as we're getting going, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That all goes a very, very long way for us. And it lets you know when we're going live here at Awesemo for all of our content. We have amazing stuff going on with the Awesemo odds page. Check that out over on YouTube as well. The Awesemo fantasy football page over on YouTube as well. These channels are just popping up everywhere. You want to be subscribed to all of those. Take a look at it. We'll get to them a little bit later here. But as we're getting going here, the MLB trade deadline is approaching. Be kind of cognizant of the guys that may or may not move. Trevor Story here for Colorado is somebody to have on your radar. We just saw Max Scherzer deal today, and now it sounds like he's going to the Padres. But overall trade deadline thoughts, Adam?
Should be a pretty exciting one, I think. Like in recent years, it seems like it's kind of been slow, but there's just so many guys now that are upcoming free agents and available. You know, we saw the Joey Gallo trade yesterday, which I thought was fantastic for the Yankees. That lineup's just going to be so good. Gallo fits in perfect there. Now you have Scherzer close to going to San Diego, not a done deal apparently. But yeah, the biggest thing from a DFS standpoint, like you were saying, definitely be even more aware than normal that there can be some late scratches, some guys potentially pulled early from games, or, you know, just weird lineups because guys aren't playing. This San Diego Colorado game on this slate has the potential to be a nightmare because it's the last game on the slate. You have San Diego close to acquiring Scherzer. That shouldn't matter for the Padres because I doubt that they're moving anyone from their actual lineup. They have been trying to deal Eric Hosmer, though, so there's the potential for them to kind of hold their lineup. And then with the Rockies, they could trade like anybody. Story, obviously, the big piece that they have, but you could just kind of get some weirdness in that last game tonight.
Yeah, the NBA, if you play NBA DFS, you know kind of how wonky the NBA trade deadline can be. It goes kind of right down to the wire every single year. It's not going to be any different this season. But yeah, as you said, specifically that late night hammer, you could end up leaving a ton of salary on the table if certain things break a certain direction. Let's just hope Trevor Story doesn't play an inning and then gets pulled a la Trey Turner. Although that was COVID, this would be trade. I thought Trey Turner got traded at that moment, but anything else that really kind of sticks out? Is there a team specifically that you see becoming more of a contender? So we obviously have Odd Shopper as well. The Padres acquiring Max Scherzer to be alongside Yu Darvish as a 1-2 punch. We have Joe Musgrove we'll get to on this slate as well. But is there a team that you think could make a big jump and you might want to be valuing a little bit higher right now? I'm
not really sure because I don't even know what the standings look like right now. But I do think that the NL West in particular is a spot to pay a lot of attention to because that division is just so close with the Padres, the Dodgers, and the Giants. You have the Padres apparently close to getting Scherzer. You have the Dodgers who most likely aren't going to have Trevor Bauer the rest of the year. They need starting pitching. Their odds obviously will increase if they're able to go out and get a good starter. So definitely the potential for things to really shake up in that division.
Love it. Well, with that, let's get ourselves down to business here. We've got a lot of big contests around the industry. Let's just get to it. I love this. Milwaukee minus 181 at Pittsburgh. 8 total runs here. Speaking of San Diego, they acquired Adam Frazier. That makes the lineup look a little bit worse with Wilmer Defoe now at 2K leading off, going up against Freddy Peralta, who is rightfully going to be crazy owned on this slate. He's had a tiny bit of a drop-off, not a Joe Musgrove-like drop-off here since the sticky stuff. It's more control-based with him with the walks is kind of what you're always hoping to avoid. But 52% ownership, 45% top 2 pitcher percentage on DK. How do you view Freddy Peralta on this slate?
I expect to get to a ton of Peralta here. 10K I don't think is too expensive. There's, obviously only so many pitching options on a 5-game slate. And then you've got a really, really good matchup here for Peralta as well. He comes in with the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 34.5%. The walks are an issue, like you said, 11% for the season, but he doesn't give up a lot of power. 3.74 xFIP is really good. It's really just, you need him to not walk guys, but other than that, it's not a lineup that really inspires much fear. He's a really good pitcher. So I don't really have any issues with Peralta's ownership being where it's at, even though it is so high, just because there's only 10 pitchers on the slate, and not all of them are even really options.
Yeah, and we've got weather that's kind of popping up everywhere. Obviously, the Toronto-Boston game. I just refreshed some stuff at other places, and it looks as though Baltimore, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Pittsburgh both have a little bit of rain or scattered showers kind of in the forecast here. So be aware of that. Be checking in with MLB Live Before Lock here coming up after us. That'll be an important thing, part of your process. Greg and Terry will be leading you guys up to the end of the bell. And then News God, always in and out of chat, keeping everybody informed. Be subscribed to the notifications and get the notifications on Twitter as well from the @Awesemo MLB channel. On the other side of this, Pittsburgh, I mean, Chad Kuhl. What can we even say about Chad Kuhl on this slate with three guys that we have there? 19.9% K percentage. I mean, the thing we got to say is that this is a short slate. He's cheap. What are you doing with Chad Kuhl?
Yeah, I mean, the one positive I think you can point to with Kuhl is that he's done an okay job at limiting power this season. 142 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, 151 to lefties. Strikeout stuff hasn't really been there, though. Like you said, around the 20% strikeout percentage overall for Kuhl. He is fully stretched out. You do have a Milwaukee lineup that has some strikeouts in it, but Kuhl's getting about 12% ownership. He's got about a 14% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So I think the ownership's about where it should be. He's certainly a viable option amongst the cheap SP2s if you need to go there on DraftKings, but it's not someone I'm going to be excited about unless, not even unless. It's more so if you need him to get expensive bats in your lineup, then fine. But it's certainly not my first priority or anything.
Yeah, and we've got Manny Pena playing catcher here today, so that's probably a bump up for him as well. Just in terms of not having Narvaez, who's been batting higher in the order there, been hitting better of late here as well. So I think that's a little bit of an upgrade there for Chad Kuhl. 78 degrees, 84% humidity, definitely a decent enough hitting environment here. But looking at the Milwaukee side, we're still going to want to be targeting some of these bats. It looks like at the top stacks tool. Definitely, there's only 10 teams. What can you possibly say? I mean, Milwaukee's middle of the pack here, 11% top stack percentage, but a number of teams are 11 to 13%. They're cheap. How are you handling Milwaukee bats?
Yeah, the one thing that stands out is that they are projected to be the second most over-owned team here. And I think that makes sense just because of how cheap they are. You still have Rowdy Tellez at 2,600, Tyrone Taylor hitting 5th at 2,500, Low Canes at 2,800. So it's, Avi Garcia is down to 3,300. It's a really, really cheap team. So it's going to be very easy to pay up for 2 pitchers, plug in the Brewers who have a healthy implied run total, and move on. Kuhl's not a total gas can. He's a below average pitcher, but it's not like it would be shocking if he has a good enough start that the Brewers don't break the slate open. So I think that right now, from an aggregate stack perspective, I don't anticipate getting to a lot of Milwaukee just because they are one of the most over-owned teams. Individually, the entire team getting ownership as well. Tellez, Wong, and Garcia all projected for 20+% ownership on DraftKings. Nobody below the 12% that Urias is getting. So I think it's just going to be a difficult team to get to while still differentiating your lineups.
In Pittsburgh, super low top stack potential, underneath 3% on this slate. Probably not looking at them as a stack, but are there some one-offs between Brian Hayes, who has not been good here this month, Brian Reynolds perhaps, and Ben Gamel's still 2K?
Not that I'm going to be too excited about. The thing with Pittsburgh is that even though they're going up against Peralta, we actually still have them projected to be a little bit over-owned in terms of their top stack percentage. You do get some value with Defoe at 2K, Gamble at 2K, Castro, who I believe hit 2 homers yesterday, at 2,500. The lineup's really, really cheap. And with 50% ownership going to Peralta, you certainly can make the case to fire up some Pirate stacks if you are playing those really large field, top-heavy tournaments. But it's a very low probability play. You kind of have to understand that it's not going to work out a lot. It's more so that you're just trying to get leverage against Peralta. But even if you're going that route, looking at the current ownership projections, I think I would rather, like, if I have to go against Peralta with the Pirates or against Musgrove with the Rockies, I think I would lean towards targeting Musgrove at set right now projected for 70+% ownership.
I am right there with you. I just saw a trade summary come through in my notifications, and I started reading it, and it was like Nets and Suns, and I was like, oh, it's Landry Shamet for Javon Carter. I love a trade night here. This is exciting stuff. Not the trade I was necessarily expecting from them, but either way, anything left to talk about in this game?
No, I don't think so.
All right. We got Baltimore plus 140 at Detroit, 10 total runs here with this one. Again, we've got 50 minutes. We're going to have plenty of time. If you guys have questions, if you guys want to talk about Landry Shamet for whatever God knows what reason, we're going to have plenty of time here today to be able to discuss everything. This isn't our normal 10, 12, 14 game slate where we're just going game. So if you guys have specific questions for how to handle a short slate or want to talk about some intricacies between DraftKings and FanDuel, we have the time. We have plenty of opportunity to do that. Load them in the premium Slack as well. That would definitely be much appreciated. But Baltimore, plus 140 at Detroit, 10 total runs here in this one. Alexander Wells here on one side. Detroit, so strange to see them on any slate with the highest implied run total, but here we are, also coming in with a crazy amount of ownership. But first, pitching-wise, what can we possibly say about Casey Mize versus Alexander Wells?
Yeah, so Alex Wells made his first major league start, I believe. It was his third appearance of the season. I believe it was his first start, July 21st against Tampa Bay. He threw 93 pitches, which is good. He's 5,200. He's facing the Tigers. He threw 93 pitches. The problem is just that it's really hard to point to much about him that is good. He's kind of like, Fangraphs has him ranked as the Orioles' 32nd prospect. He's one of these guys where he's in the majors with the Orioles right now because he's not good enough that they care about service time on him. They're not going to hide him out in the minors until the Orioles are going to start competing like they would with someone like Rutschman or Grayson Rodriguez or their actual top prospects. This is a guy where they're just like, yeah, we don't really care about your career. You can make some major league money, so it works out for you, and it benefits us because we're not using guys that we actually care about. So it's certainly not someone that really has much going for him. He struck out 20% of hitters at AAA this year. He allowed 1.26 home runs per 9, which I don't know much about AAA parks, but I do know that Norfolk, where the Orioles AAA team plays, is an extremely favorable pitcher's park. So doesn't bode very well that he's giving up home runs there, I don't think. Just not someone I really want to get to. On the other side, Casey Mize, obviously a much better prospect than Alex Wells. The concern with Mize would be that they kind of tapered him off in terms of pitch count going into the All-Star break. They said they were going to slowly ramp him back up coming out. He threw 54 pitches in his first start after the All-Star break, followed it up with 79 pitches last game. So I think that maybe we can treat Casey Mize like we would have, a month and a half ago. And he does make for an interesting option at 6,900 here against the Orioles. He's only getting 9% ownership. He's actually getting less ownership than Chad Kuhl. Definitely not someone that you're going to be super confident in anyway, because he really hasn't shown a whole lot at the big league level yet, only a 20% strikeout percentage, but not getting much ownership. I think a good chance that you can get 90 pitchers or so from him here, 85 to 90, and a decent matchup against the Orioles, who are missing somebody, who don't have Ryan Mountcastle in their lineup. So lineup's a little bit more than normal. I do have some interest in Casey Mize.
Interesting. And anybody that isn't Peralta, Musgrove, or Montas is going to go drastically low owned. That's just kind of the way that this slate sets up. It can also just be a hedge. I mean, he doesn't even have to go off in this spot. If you get one of those two, or maybe two of the three, to kind of go below 20, just not meet the expectation that everybody has at these ownerships for them, a guy like Casey Mize can definitely work out there at 6,900, gives you access maybe to more Padres bats, maybe to more bats in another team. I definitely think that makes some sense. On FanDuel, probably tougher to talk myself into anybody that isn't one of those three, because more than likely one of those three pitchers at the top end is going off. Would you have any interest on a single pitcher site whatsoever to be looking at Casey Mize?
No, God, no.
Yeah, see, that's all I wanted to hear. But again, we have 45 minutes. I had to throw it out there. It just seemed like fun. Of course, top stacks here. Detroit, ownership. The highest owned team, still 13% chance of being a top stack here. We got to be able to be picky, a little picky, but you're going to have a bunch of all these teams. If you're making 150 lineups, if you're making a bunch of lineups, it's going to be a lot of overlap. Is there a way that you can treat this game specifically from the Detroit side to get a little bit different?
You can use guys like Zach Short and Derek Hill. That's not very appealing because they're hitting 8th and 9th, and right. Neither one offers a ton of upside. Like when you go to the Tigers, you want Akil Baddoo, you want Scope, you want Robbie Grossman, who, by the way, just on a kind of semi on topic tangent, I didn't really realize how good Robbie Grossman's gotten. Like back when he was on like Minnesota, he was just this like kind of like 100 WRC plus, didn't hit for much power, didn't really steal, just kind of put the ball in play. And then over the last couple of years, he's around like 110 to 115, steals bases, hits home runs. So Kind of just on a side note, he has made some drastic improvements in his game. But when you go to the Tigers, you want Badu, you want Scope, you want Grossman, you want Eric Haas. Those guys are all getting massive ownership. So I think it's kind of difficult to go to this team and not sacrifice the upside that you want, because there's such a drop off when you get to the bottom of the order. But it is a good spot. Eric Haas being a catcher certainly means he should get a lot of ownership here. But in general, I kind of throw Detroit up there with Milwaukee, where I'll probably just end up going to some other teams that look not quite as good, but still look pretty good.
In the Baltimore side, we've got Cedric Mullins. He's in the middle of a great season. One of the few, the proud, the Baltimore Orioles who don't suck. Austin Hayes, Trey Mancini is really good, but he's 5.2K here. It looks like at the top stack tool right now with 11% towards them, pretty flat ownership. I think I'm prioritizing more Baltimore on this side, even though Casey Mize, I think, does make for a good low-owned tournament pivot. But how are you handling Baltimore here?
Has really given up a lot of power to lefties this year. 270 expected ISO, 249 actual ISO for Mize against lefties. He's held righties to a 131 expected ISO. So ideally, you're looking to left-handed power bats. The Orioles only have Cedric Mullins and DJ Stewart that fit that criteria at all. Domingo Leyba is the only other left-handed hitter in the lineup, and he's not much of a power hitter. So you look to those guys, but Mullins is getting 21.5% ownership. DJ Stewart's getting 14%. So it's not like they're really going on their own. But the thing is that you can, full stack this team. You can include Trey Mancini at 8%. That's a spot that I think you would use a lot of if you're full stacking. He's like the one guy that is a good hitter on the Orioles that isn't getting ownership. So I do like kind of overpaying for Mancini here and including him along with Mullins, Hayes, Stewart.
Is there a favorite bat that you'd kind of be taking from both teams?
Eric Haas from Detroit. The position I think makes him extremely valuable. And then from the Orioles, Cedric Mullins.
All right. Love it. Love it. Love it. Also, another thing that I love is these two new YouTube channels. I had talked about them a little bit at the top of the program. We are making content every single day leading up to this fantasy football season. They are going on the Awesemo Odds and the Awesemo Fantasy Football channels. Just check them out, because if you like what we do for DFS, you're going to love what we do also for the season long, for the best ball drafts that are getting done. Matt Gajewski and Lofty are doing such an amazing job with that. We're doing videos. I'm doing videos with Lofty, and we had one with Ben Rasa here today as well. We covered Defensive Player of the Year odds. We cover Super Bowl odds, AFC and NFC odds. I mean, there is no shortage of what we're able to talk about leading up to the start of this NFL season. So make sure you stay up to date with all of those by just simply heading over to the subscribe button here that is coming up on the screen. Look at that. Producer Jordan, he's on top of it there. The Awesemo Odds Sports Betting channel. Check out the Week 1 NFL Best Bets. I absolutely love Eagles plus 3.5 in this spot. A lot of unknowns that exist for that football team. Take a look at some of the videos we have there. And it also just Odd Shopper. It's a great complementary piece to everything that's going on with YouTube from the sports betting aspect. They've got MVP odds up. They've got divisional odds up. If you got on the Packers early on for the NFC North, good for you. I didn't, but then you still have spots like the Lions where you can short them. And that's all available through all the videos that we're making. That's information that's available at Odd Shopper for free. So take advantage of that right now, because there's just no better time to get prepared for the NFL and the flurry of contests that are going to be coming in just less than a month and a half. So start getting prepared now. It's going to be a fantastic season here at Awesemo, and I hope you're as excited as what I am. Let's keep ourselves moving along here. We've got 3 games, but some massive weather concerns that we've had for Boston the last couple days. I think that looks like it's going to exist again here today. Looking around the industry, looks like it's just raining at the beginning of the game. If they're going to play it here, they're going to play it, is kind of the impression that I'm getting. So unless we hear that game is going to get postponed before first pitch, I'm happy to play it. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, if it starts out in a delay, I'll be really concerned. Obviously, if they postpone it, I won't play it. But assuming that they don't start in a delay, I'm going to go ahead and just play it as normal.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it as well. But otherwise, we're going to break it down as if it is happening here. Again, we only have 3 more games to cover. So, of course, we're going to get into depth with this one. Hyun-Jin Ryu on one side here for Toronto, 5.1 implied runs for them. Going up against Eduardo Rodriguez, 5.5 runs. 2 guys that kind of get things done a little bit differently. Eduardo Rodriguez just strikes dudes out. He's kind of been going deeper into counts. His underlying metrics, though, have been fantastic this season. 35.5% hard hit percentage, 27.4% K percentage, as opposed to Ryu, where those underlying stats aren't there, but he limits the walks as well, just kind of gets on by. How are you looking at both pitchers in this spot?
They're both good. Rodriguez would be the one that I think is more interesting for DFS purposes. The problem, obviously, is just the matchup is really difficult. But with there only being 10 pitchers to choose from, I am interested in both guys. But again, especially in Rodriguez, because he does come in with really good strikeout upside. Against right-handed hitters this year, he struck out 27.3%. Overall, he has struck out 27.4% of hitters. He does give up power with 1.3 home runs per nine. It's certainly a risky spot, but he's one of the only pitchers on the slate that's not getting much ownership that is at least in the same ballpark as the pitchers that are getting ownership. Like Joe Musgrove is $600 less than Rodriguez on DraftKings. And right now we have him projected to get 74% ownership, which may be a little high, but still, like even let's call it 60 or something. That's just, still 5 times what Rodriguez is projected to get. So I don't think the gap between the two is that big, even though the matchup is better for Musgrove and his strikeout numbers are really, really good. Obviously in cash games, you're going to Musgrove, but I think that pivot in tournaments is one you can look to. And then on the other side, Boston, a very dangerous offense against Hyun-Jin Ryu. He doesn't have the strikeout stuff that Eduardo Rodriguez has. For the season, Ryu has only struck out 19.9% of hitters. So it's going to be more difficult to get to him and roll the dice on him in this spot. But he also is getting 4.5% ownership. He is easily the most talented of the actual low-owned pitchers on the slate. If you're including Ryu, Mize, Dylan Bundy, Alex Wells, Kyle Freeland, and ignoring price, like just talking in terms of getting a talented pitcher at low ownership, Ryu is really the only option.
And 15.7% top 2 pitcher percentage. I mean, he has by far the most leverage. He's coming in under 5%. Part of that is the matchup. Part of it, Ryu doesn't necessarily have any strikeout stuff here as well. But on one of these shorter slates where you're seeing the ownership so condensed here, if you're playing like a 3 max, of course, I'm playing a 3 max today for sure. But if you're looking at like a 3 max situation, is Ryu viable enough, sub 5%, where you might think of playing him in one of 3?
I don't want to say no because I don't hate the idea, but I think if I'm going that route, I would still go Rodriguez. So I haven't figured out what teams I'd be playing, but I'm just kind of running Fantasy Cruncher in the background right now and trying to get an idea of just like where guys are showing up for me in that. Ryu's showing up at like 4%, Erod showing up at like 7%. That doesn't mean that's what I would play because then I take my lineups and do other stuff and it'll bump up some guys. But it is giving me the idea that I still would rather get to Erod than Ryu, I think.
I think so too. It's just hard to, if you're going to outperform those 3 guys, especially on DraftKings, kind of mixing and matching 2 of them. I feel as though Peralta, Musgrove, Montas, Rodriguez, the 4 of them just combined together to have mixing and matching them over and over seems a little bit more viable. Even going to the cheap end, with Chad Kuhl, I mean, 8,600 isn't any kind of a discount. I think if you made Ryu 7K, if you made him 7,500, it might be a more intriguing spot to be making more of those pivots. But of course, these bats are just lethal on both sides, both lefties, both southpaws, going up against a bunch of righties, kind of a murderer's row up and down here, starting with the Toronto side. Springer, Guerrero Jr., Simeon, Bichette, all of them extremely expensive. Going to the top stacks tool, they are the top stack, but the ownership is drastically lower. And we're seeing some disparity that you normally see on some of these smaller slates just because everybody's going to try to pay up for pitching and the security that exists there. Doesn't that make you want to get to more Toronto tonight?
Yeah, it does. They're expensive. They're difficult to get to. It's going to require rolling the dice on some questionable pitching, but it is a high upside spot for the Blue Jays just because they have so much power. It's not a good matchup against Rodriguez. He's done a very good job limiting right-handed power in particular. 126 expected ISO against righties this year, and that's pretty much all he's going to be facing tonight from Toronto. But when you're just thinking in terms of ceiling and how high can this team realistically score when they have good games, there's just so much power from Springer, Guerrero, Semien, Bichette, Hernandez, Grichuk. The bottom of the order is kind of garbage, but 1 through 6 at least, there's a lot of power here. Biggio, I won't even include as being garbage. He's just not as good as the first 6. But Espinal and McGuire don't really make you too excited. But there's still a very high ceiling. And again, it's just Detroit is going to get ownership, like a terrible team. Not terrible, a bad offense. they're going to get ownership. Milwaukee's going to get ownership in a kind of a good but not great spot. So I just think that in tournaments, going to these teams that are a little bit more expensive, a little bit more difficult to get to, that's typically are what win tournaments. It's typically not that your $10,000 pitcher scores so many points other people can't catch up. It's more so that you hit on the right bats, and the Blue Jays at relatively low ownership, I think, give you that opportunity.
Yeah, I think Casey Mize with one of the 3 studs and going to Toronto bats, I think it's very doable. And how many 5-game slates ever are you going to see Vlad Guerrero Jr. around 6.5% owned? I mean, that's just kind of crazy to be looking at. He'll come in probably underneath 10%. And in tournaments, that's a number that I think you definitely want to be north of if you can, if you feel comfortable going to the Casey Mize route and trying to mix and match a number of those starters. But then on the Boston side as well, going up against Ryu, I had spoken to it earlier, not as good at limiting hard contact this season, 41.3%, 421 expected slugging, south of 20% K percentage, limits the walks, but everything else, I mean, he's giving up some contact. It's not necessarily completely getting in the air, 8.9 degree launch angle. Maybe the monster neutralizes some of that. You get those green monster singles just on pulled balls to the left field side in Fenway. But I mean, Boston's still just so good as a team. How are you handling this team tonight?
Yeah, they're another team that I like the idea of being overweight on in tournaments because they are a little bit more expensive. There's a little bit more value in the Red Sox lineup than there is in the Blue Jays lineup, but they're still projected to go a little bit under owned here compared to other teams towards the top of the top stack percentage. And the same things we said about Toronto apply to the Red Sox. Ryu's a pretty good pitcher. He's pretty good at limiting production against them, but you just have a ton of power in the Red Sox lineup that can take advantage of Ryu if he's not at the very top of his game, and you're just not getting quite as much ownership as Boston should probably get. So I like Toronto a little bit more because they're lower owned than the Red Sox are, but I think the Red Sox look like one of the better stacks tonight as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hunter Renfroe there in the 5-hole, 3.7K, going to be an important part of putting together that team. Bobby Dahlbeck as well in the 8-hole has plenty of power that exists there. 435 expected slugging on the season, 42% hard hit percentage. Those aren't numbers you generally see from an 8-hole hitter here. Really low walk rate, really high K rate, but there's definitely some boom bust potential in him. Is there a way you might combine Boston to get unique like that?
Yeah, and I think that that's a perfectly good way to go because Bobby Dahlbeck does have power. He is cheap. Christian Vasquez, not the best, but he does cover the catcher position for you. Boston just gives you a pretty nice mix of salary and still has power top to bottom. So I think mixing and matching your lineup is pretty easy.
All righty. Anything else from this game here from either lineup or anything else to touch on?
Don't be afraid to use Red Sox lefties to differentiate either. Okay. Right now we have Jaron Duran projected for 9% ownership, Franchi Cordero at 3.5%, Alex Verdugo at 2.2. Hyunjin Ryu is actually allowed a 187 ISO to lefties compared to a 155 ISO to righties this year. He's just not someone that is normally like lights out against left-handed bats. He's typically good against everyone, but he just isn't a typical lefty that shuts down left-handed bats. So I think that if you are stacking the Red Sox, using those guys, Duran batting second, Verdugo batting sixth in particular, is another pretty good way to go.
So yeah, well, we're going to get to some reverse splits talk here a little bit later with one of the pitchers, one of those core 3, in fact. So I'm excited for that. But also, while we have the opportunity here, let's talk about Jock Market. If you haven't heard, Jock Market has turned fantasy sports into the stock exchange. So forget about waiting till the end of the game. You can basically be sitting on your couch. You have the opportunity every single second of every single game that you're watching on TV in MLB, in NHL and NBA when those come back, in the PGA right now as well, for NFL, which will be coming here very, very soon. Make sure that you are playing on Jock Market so you can take advantage of news as it comes in, as things are changing minute by minute, second by second. You can make real money at any hour. So why not? Use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players, buy, sell, and hold them during the game based on analysis, based on if somebody gets injured, based on anything that is happening in real time. Make the exchange over there. All you have to do is download the app to get started and use our exclusive Awesemo promo code, Awesemo, easy enough, AWESEMO, for up to a $50 deposit bonus on your first deposit. It's an exclusive offer only for the Awesemo community. Make sure you take advantage of that because Jock Market is definitely a fun place to be playing at. I've really enjoyed, there's a couple of times where you can get a pinch hitter for $1. You can get guys that have an opportunity with bases loaded in situations to put a lot of points on the board, shoot up the leaderboard, and you can be in a fantastic spot, specifically with some National League teams. That's a fun way to go about it here. Also, for some of these lower owned plays, get two of them together, have them correlate a little bit. See if you can't get one or two to possibly hit a home run with the other one on base. That can be a way that you can definitely shoot up the leaderboard as well. A little bit more top heavy to get up to the number one spot. But guys like Vlad Guerrero Jr., guys like Shohei Ohtani are going to be very expensive tonight. You're going to be paying full freight to try to get that $25 first prize for each share if they end up being the highest scorer on the slate. So try to get a little bit different still on the bottom end and target some of those cheaper bats for sure. But otherwise, thank you so much to Jock Market. Love playing over there, and I think you will as well. Now let's get into next on the board. Oakland -103 heading to Anaheim here. The LA Angels, 9 total runs here in this one. Frankie Montas is the guy that I was just alluding to. When you're talking about reverse splits, it's kind of a strange case with him because in 2020, the guy got completely lit up by left-handers. Just abysmal. I'm going to pull up the splits here in a second because if you have them in front of you, let me know. But
I do.
You do? Okay. His 2020 splits against lefties, just read them off.
280 ISO allowed, 247 expected ISO, 444 WOBA, 384 expected WOBA, 21.6% strikeout percentage.
Just outrageous. So that's your normal platoon split. This season, the thing that's really changed for Frankie Montas, the difference between then and now, the guy's been better against left-handed pitching. 3.23 ERA total going up against them, 1.17 whip, only 6 home runs allowed to left-handed batters, 55.2 innings. So identical innings pitched basically between the two. And against righties, he's 56.1 innings pitched as well, 1.38 whip, 5.43 ERA. He has this splitter that he's throwing, this split finger pitch that is so effective, gets a ton of swing and misses, specifically against lefties. I think that kind of makes it interesting looking at this Angels lineup as it's about to come out. I think the more lefties there are in it, the better strikeout opportunity that exists for Montas. Do you agree with that? And what are you seeing from him tonight?
Yeah, I think so, because I agree completely with the splitter. He's upped his usage this year to about 30%, whereas last year it was at 18%. I'm more confused why he's not striking out righties anymore, because last year he struck out 29% of righties. This year he's at 19.5%. He's throwing his slider 31% this year. He threw it 29.5% last year. So I don't think that's it. The swinging strike percentage is actually higher on his slider this year. Splitter usage is actually higher to righties. So I have no idea why he's striking out less righties. I agree completely why he's striking out more lefties. What it really makes me think is that Frankie Montas could actually just see an uptick in overall strikeout percentage going forward, where he starts striking out more righties as well. But either way, if especially because with the Angels, it's outside of Ohtani, you're not concerned really about the lefties. If they put Matt Tice in the lineup, yeah, he has some power, but he'll strike out. Brandon Marsh is not off to a very good start. Adam Eaton, you think he's really good, but he's not somebody that you're really good about. So, I think that whoever else, if they want to put more lefties in there, that would be even better. But overall, I just think he's a really good option here at 9K.
And he's the lowest owned of the 3. And I think all of that combined, I want to be a little reactionary to how this Angels lineup comes out, because I do think there is something going on with this split finger pitch that he is throwing and his capability of just getting swings and misses from the left side of the plate here on the season. That pitch specifically, I mean, he's throwing it, as you said, he upped the usage of it, 54.6% whiff percentage on the season, 26.6% put away percentage. Those are useful numbers for him. And if he's going to come in the lowest owned of the 3, I'm going to come in the highest on him out of all 3 of them grouped together, specifically Joe Musgrove with that ownership. It is mind-blowing looking at that. And of course, we'll get to that here later, but we got to at least touch base on the other side here with Dylan Bundy, who has not been the Dylan Bundy of old whatsoever. I'm not even sure what this pitch count is going to look like, considering he's been out of the bullpen. He's only shown up in 5 games since they basically, quote unquote, demoted him on the 20th of June here to the bullpen from a starting role, because all he was doing was getting lit up. 6.69 ERA this season, 1.41 whip. Dylan Bundy in play whatsoever today?
I don't really think so. So he's actually showing up for me a decent amount in Fantasy Cruncher, but I think the projection is just a little bit too high on him, because I'm with you. I don't really think he goes that deep into this game. And even if he does go deep, obviously he was pitching well, but even if he is pitching well, I don't think he goes deep. He hasn't thrown more than 47 pitches in a game since June 20th. Unless he just like quickly got stretched out, in bullpen sessions, which is possible, but I don't think it's super likely here. I just don't anticipate him going that deep into this game. And then you also have the issue of he's been absolutely terrible this year. So, even if you tell me Bundy can throw 75, 80 pitches, I still don't know how interested I'd be here.
Maybe you don't want him to.
Right. Yeah. So it's, I think I'll be cutting back on the Bundy. Like, he's showing up in 12% of my lineups on Fantasy Cruncher right now. I think I'll be cutting that back when I finalize my lineups. But it's really difficult, I think, to get the Bundy, especially because you do have alternatives on this slate. Bundy's only getting 1% ownership, but Casey Mize is only $700 more. Chad Kuhl is only $200 more. Even if you wanted to save $1,000 and really roll the dice on like an Alex Wells, he's getting the same ownership as Bundy, and you at least know he's capable of throwing 90 plus pitches if he somehow pitches well.
Looks like all the weather came down a little bit. It looks like it's going to be pretty clean here, unless we get news, of course. Unless we get news from the news god in premium Slack that things are going to get kind of messed up here. But looks like everything kind of got decreased across, whether that was Boston, Detroit, Pittsburgh. All three of them have scattered showers in the mix here. But the Boston one was the major one we were concerned about. So wanted to address that as we're going along. Of course, Frankie Montas, the priority here in this Angels game for me. And then Dylan Bundy, again, I don't know what that pinch count is going to look like. Is there any case, just if you got 60 pitches from him and, everybody else failed, I mean, is it still viable to get to a couple % of him?
I still think I'd just rather be going to like Casey Mize.
Okay.
If there's 10 pitchers on the slate. If you're playing 150 lineups and you end up with a couple Dylan Bundy, then okay. Like, I'm not Xing him out of my player pool, but
right,
I don't really X anybody out of my player pool ever. So that being said, like, he's certainly not showing up for me in 3 max or single entry or 20 max or anything. I would just rather go to Mize. If I want a 1% owned pitcher, like I'm dead set on 1%, I would just rather take Alex Wells against a really popular Detroit team and try and get some leverage that way.
All right, we got a couple of questions here in the premium Slack. Let's do this before we get to the bats of the Oakland and Angels game. But on smaller slates like today, I think that this is a great question, just kind of all-encompassing, more of a strategy show question. But again, we have plenty of time here. On smaller slates like today, Adam, do you change your stacks going 5-2-1 or 4-3? Is there a different stack combination that you do to account for a smaller slate?
Yeah, I do run a little bit more 4-4, 4-3 type stacks. On the bigger slates, I typically only play 5-mans, whether it's 5X or 5-2 or 5-3. On smaller slates, I will at least I'll make some 4-mans and mix them in.
Okay, I think that that's extremely viable, and it's harder to get the 5 to just guarantee go for double-digit runs or something the way you might on other slates. So I think you can definitely kind of put them all together in different combinations. 4-3-1 specifically makes a lot of sense. 4-2-1-1 if you want to, just to even get a little bit further different. If there's specific one-offs that can give you savings to get to the kind of pitchers that you want, or just to get up to a Montas Peralta type lineup for sure. But good question there as well. Thank you, Larry C., my guy, for that. Jets World, we'll get to that one later here as we get into the San Diego bats. But first, let's talk bats here from this game. Oakland, Matt Chapman seems like he's finally starting to actually exist here. He's going to be probably moved down to the 8 or 9 hole, though, in this spot. I mean, that tells you Oakland on the top end with the acquirement of Starling Marte. How do you think he's going to fit into this lineup, other than obviously he's going to be an improvement off of, some of the slappies that they've been playing in the outfield of late? But how do you feel about this Oakland lineup now with Marte in it?
I think it gives it even more upside, because not only does it add another guy that has power in the outfield, but he has speed as well. He may not run as frequently with Oakland as he did on Miami, since Oakland actually has hitters that if they're a bat, you don't really want to be running into outs. Whereas for the most part, it doesn't matter who's hitting for Miami. If you make it out on the bases, you just save some time. So I think that maybe the stolen bases come down a little bit, but still offers some stolen base upside to this lineup, in addition to being a good hitter. And you're still going to have Kana, you still have Laureano. It probably just replaces Piscotty. So I think overall it just makes the A's an even higher upside stack, even though it does also make them a little bit more expensive.
All right. And on the Angels side, Yeah, Frankie Montas. I love getting to him in this spot. I've talked about that, but it's hard to deny Shohei Ohtani and Justin Upton and Max Stassi and those guys on this kind of a slate. Matt Tice, if you got him in there, perhaps. I don't know what this lineup is going to look like at all. It could be a number of different iterations depending on what Joe Madden wants to do with those reverse splits that Montas has clearly shown this entire season. But how do you really view this lineup? Is there anybody outside of Ohtani you might prioritize against a good pitcher like Montas?
No, definitely wouldn't say prioritize.
Okay.
Justin Upton's salary is still pretty cheap for someone that has decent power. Max Stassi's okay as a catcher, but I think the Angels overall look like one of the less appealing options to me because they are one of the lowest top stack percentages. They're not really projected. They're not projected to be overowned, but they're not really projected to be underowned. And then Montas isn't getting as much ownership as the other good / popular pitchers on the slate. So they don't really move up my rankings for any of the reasons that teams normally do.
So we got to get a live reaction to you from this. Did you see the Woj bomb from 15 minutes ago?
I'm kind of trying to catch up on it now. I'm getting the impression that the Wizards are getting Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, and KCP for Russ.
Yep, that's interesting. First reaction from you, the noted Wizards fan.
Beal might finally request a trade. And I mean, it gets out of Russ's contract, I guess, which is good, but it just sucks because they were actually fun to watch and now they're not going to be fun to watch. I wonder,
your 1 year of Westbrook was amazing, wasn't it?
Follow-up thought, and it would keep Beal around, is if this ultimately ends with Ben Simmons coming, that would be interesting, and I'd be in favor of that, I guess.
I would definitely be in favor for that as well. I mean, you could never. We were talking a little bit before the show what Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons on the same floor would look like, and it was hilarious just to even think about it. It's not doable.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my thinking. Like, if the Sixers end up backing off of their egregious trade demands and can work something out with the Wizards, then Westbrook being gone makes Simmons a better fit, and they'll still be a fun team to watch, and they'll still be not championship good, but good enough. But yeah, I mean, if you're just getting Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell for Russell Westbrook, I would assume Beal is requesting a trade in the next 48 minutes, and that the Wizards are just going to be absolute garbage.
Oh, Adam, I'm so sorry. Welcome to Timberwolves fandom.
I'm mostly upset because I didn't make it to a Wizards game this year.
Oh,
to see Russ.
You didn't get to see Russ at any point in time. He was like your second-born child or first-born child. I don't know why did I say second-born? Do you have a first-born child? That would be an amazing segue.
I don't.
You don't? Are you sure?
Not that anyone has wanted to introduce to me.
Promiscuous guy. Okay, let's keep it moving here. I want to finish out. Any final thoughts that we really have? Playing Ohtani, not a hot take if you decide to do that. Is there any viability? This might be the right question to ask, and I don't know why I didn't ask it earlier. Is there some viability to rostering Montas and Shohei Ohtani in the same lineup?
I don't hate it because it is a smaller slate, so I don't mind that. And then obviously Ohtani can just hit bombs off of anybody. It's not a far-fetched scenario to say, okay, Frankie Montas outscores Joe Musgrove, and oh, by the way, Shohei Ohtani homered and doubled, and because that's what he does. So I don't mind that. On a 5-game slate, I typically don't use a batter against the pitcher, but I don't mind. For example, in Fantasy Cruncher, all you would have to do is set it to max 1 hitter against your pitcher, and then go in and set it so that you don't roster a hitter against the pitcher and then just exclude the Angels from that, and then make a group saying for none of the Angels except Ohtani to be in a lineup with Montas. It would take 30 seconds to do probably. So it's easy enough to do. I really don't mind that idea.
Yeah, and people aren't willing to do that kind of stuff. So that's why you should be willing to do that kind of stuff. I don't know if I would do it in a 3-max or a 20-max setting, but I think in your 150, having a couple lineups with a guy who has the potential to just hit a bomb, who's plus 300, check out our MLB player props tool as well to see some of those not strikeouts specifically. We have the strikeout numbers, but the home run probabilities for some of these guys, even just grouping that and seeing what they're set at, that can give you a good impression on the slate and against a popular pitcher. Obviously, Montas, he's the lowest owned of the 3, but he's still going to be a popular pitcher on this slate. definitely a positive spot to possibly be looking at just getting a little bit different on a slate like this. Get your 14 from him, get 20 something and 9Ks from Montas and collect all the money. That sounds like a fun time. But anything else to finish out with this game?
No. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, Oakland bats. Yeah. So we were talking a little bit about Marte, how he exists there in that lineup. Mark Canha, Matt Olson, phenomenal power hitter, obviously. After a poor 2020, he's kind of the reverse Matt Chapman, where Matt Chapman went down this year and Matt Olson's back to being Matt Olson. So that's always enjoyable. But from the left side of the plate here, going up against Dylan Bundy, I mean, God, fire up as much Oakland as possible. You're looking at the top stacks tool as well, coming in way under-owned as well. Prioritize them in Toronto and move on with your day, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing this. I mean, Dylan Bundy gives up power. The A's have power. It's not like he's going deep into the game. I'm not sure, but I don't think the Angels bullpen is great behind Bundy anyway. It's still like, even if they're not, you're still not really excited about the idea of a bullpen game. But where it does offer some increased upside is if the A's are able to just like throw 6 or 7 quick runs up on Bundy, and then the Angels are likely to use the worst reliever they have available and probably just send him out there to throw 3 innings no matter what he does. So you would run into the potential of someone really getting lit up. What just happened?
Jordan, did you flash the Tinkerbell picture? Are you sure? You didn't flash the Tinkerbell picture, but everybody's just miraculously talking about Tinker Lindquist over here. God, I hate you so much. Are you trying to ruin my life? I log into Zoom. He's being sad and mopey. I try to cheer him up with my energy. It didn't work. He hates me now. What did you seriously put up? Hang on. If we get 200 likes, you can flash Tinkerquist. Okay. But until we get 200 likes, no Tinkerquist. So you guys can like the frickin' like button, or you can just shut up. Okay. I will not have Tinkerbell. I will start banning you. EMAC, I'm not above banning you from the channel for putting a Tinkerbell in the chat, you jerk face, whatever. Yeah, I love Oakland bats here as well. I'm right there with you. I think that this is kind of the route to be going. If everybody wants to be paying up for secure pitching, I get 5 batters from one team that I can just allocate to my entire lineup, and hopefully they're the ones that can go off. And I think Toronto and Oakland are 2 more likely teams than others, specifically going directly up against Detroit, that I want to get to more of. But favorite bat specifically from Oakland side?
So I mean, with Bundy, he kind of just gives it up to both sides of the plate. 200 expected, or 199 expected ISO to righties, 208 to lefties this year. So Matt Olson looks phenomenal. Jed Lowry looks like a really good value at 4K. Canha looks good. Marte looks good. Laureano looks good. Mitch Moreland, again, like you can't play him and Olson on DraftKings, which is unfortunate. But if you if you wanted more expensive pitching, Moreland gives you a discount there. Sean Murphy has power at catcher. Chapman still has power. I mean, it's just a ridiculously powerful lineup against a pitcher that gives up a lot of home runs.
Hey, Adam, you know where you can play Mitch Moreland
FanDuel
and one Matt Olson together? You can go to FanDuel. Doesn't that sound fun?
Play Matt Olson and Mitch Moreland together does.
Yeah, so do that on FanDuel. Go make a lineup. Nope. Okay, cool. Good talk. That's all we have for FanDuel today. That's our FanDuel discussion with Adam Scherer. Thank you so much for stopping by the hot corner here for it. Another thing you should stop by. Man, these segues are just abysmal today. I apologize to everybody involved, but you need to get access to our Awesemo Plus tools and content because they are not abysmal. They are the best in the industry. And right now, they're a weekly pass for $29.95. It's full access to premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including our player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel lineup builder, our top pitchers tool, which is free today. Definitely be checking that out. Top stacks tool, everything you could imagine for MLB. MMA is still full swing going. NFL's coming up here right around the horizon, just around the river bend. I don't know why I just felt like saying that. If you're new at Awesemo Plus Platinum as well, you can take advantage of the promo code we have going, MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word. That's MLB Deeper Dive for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And of course, if you're looking to only play MLB DFS, then you can sign up for our Awesemo Plus weekly package for only $15.95. All there on the screen there for you, 25% off. Stop guessing, start winning. This is the right place to be if you want to be a better player, if you want to have your best opportunity to hitting big bucks in tournaments, in cash games. Everything is so viable here. It is fantastic how good the tools are here. Even before I was working here, I prioritized having my Awesemo Plus membership. I promise you, you will not be disappointed, and you will definitely be with the best company, the best players in the world between Adam Scherer, DeColts. Oh my God, there it is. You're such a jackass. God, seriously? God.
Oh, I hadn't seen that before.
Fuck you, Adam. Whatever. We're going to keep going. Shut up. Shut your mouth. All right. Colorado, Kyle Freeland, 6.1K for him. 3 total runs here for Colorado. Super low. Joe Musgrove, 8.2K here on DraftKings for him. Obviously, we're not looking so much at Kyle Freeland. Let's actually do that. We'll leave Joe Musgrove for last here, but we've talked a little bit about Casey Mize and some of his viability. Does Kyle Freeland whatsoever on this slate at 6.1K, limits hard contact, but still a 448 expected slugging, 17.4% K percentage? Is there any chance whatsoever in 150 lineups that you're getting to Kyle Freeland?
More than once, possibly, but it doesn't seem like it's that necessary for me right now. Like, he showed up the least in the crunch that I was doing during the show. Again, maybe that comes up a little bit once I dial Bundy back and stop getting 12% of him. Because I think Freeland is an okay pitcher, but it's a bad matchup. It's not a spot that I think is really necessary. Like, I'd still rather get to Mize. And again, like, I'd even still rather go to Alex Wells, because even if you're going to take a pitcher who's likely to fail just because he's low owned and cheap, take the one against the offense getting all the ownership. So I think I would still just rather take, an even bigger discount and just roll the dice on Wells if I'm going there.
I'm right there. I completely agree with that. I'm glad you see it the same way, because Kyle Freeland, I did not want to play him here up against this Padres offense. I don't completely hate it. We'll see what that ownership ends up on. There are individual hitters from this San Diego team that are going to get a bunch of ownership, and maybe you're not going to get the entire stack, but Tatis and Machado specifically are 34% and 26% owned. So, I mean, those are massive ownership numbers on this slate. I'm just going to group it here on DK. I mean, those are your number one, just your highest owned shortstop and your highest owned third baseman on this slate. So maybe not the full stack, but do you possibly look at it as still a possible spot of leverage, even if it's not a full stack, if it's just 2 guys from the team?
Yeah, because like they're still getting some ownership to Frazier, Nola, and Pham too. So I mean, I do think there's still leverage there. It's just you're not getting quite as much as you're getting on the Tigers, and you're paying a little bit more for Freeland. So, I mean, Freeland has a 17% strikeout percentage. He's allowed almost 1.8 homers per 9 this year. Granted that he does pitch his home games in cores, but I just have a lot of trouble getting to him.
Same. Well, I wouldn't say the best for last, because this guy freaks me out. Joe Musgrove on this slate has ungodly ownership, and it makes sense. Colorado up against right-handed pitching for the season, not very good. I mean, WRC plus numbers that don't even make sense to me. I'll let you talk about all of the intricacies of this, but Joe Musgrove since June 1st, under 20% K percentage as opposed to his 27.4% on the season. Definitely had to be affected by some of the sticky stuffs instances going on here, where some top level pitchers drop, and Joe Musgrove, the strikeouts have just not been there the same way. How are you handling his absurd ownership today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's legitimate concerns with what's gone on since the crackdown in foreign substances. Like you said, the strikeout percentage is way down. Just even going through his box scores, not to say that that's how you should judge pitchers, but you still get the point of kind of the results. He's getting a lot of games where he gives you, 16 to 20 DraftKings points, which is fine on this slate at 8,200. It's not a problem. And there is certainly upside for more because the Rockies are so bad. But with all the ownership getting there, you have to factor in that he's also a volatile pitcher, that the strikeouts are down. So he's not making up for mistakes with strikeouts like he was earlier in the year. He's allowed 1.1 home runs per 9. But it's still a really good spot. So really, it just comes back to the ownership for me. Like right now, we have him at 73%. If that's where it stays, I'm going to end up just playing more Frankie Montas for 800 more Eduardo Rodriguez for 600 more, probably a little bit more Ryu for 400 more, and then being underweight on Musgrove, because I think he's like the weakest of the popular pitchers. I'd rather pay $10K for a $5,300 Peralta than $8,200 for a 73% or 73% Musgrove. If it comes down to like 50% or something, then it changes a little bit, and I'm more likely to come in like around the field, kind of like with Andrew Heaney last night. But the way it is right now, I just anticipate being underweight on Musgrove and hoping that he doesn't kill me. That said, I think he's the very, very clear SP2 in cash.
Man, even just talking through this, I'm just getting visions of all three of those dudes being like 55% owned tonight. Like Frankie Montas, I don't think gets close to Peralta and Musgrove, but for sure, it can't be that far of a gap. I wouldn't think. Man, I'm just realizing how much Montas I'm going to get to on this slate, and that's not going to be a fun sweat whatsoever. That could go south real quick. But from the Colorado side, I mean, they've started to bat a little bit better of late. Up against right-handed pitching, though, 76 WRC plus is what I was alluding to earlier, up against righties. So just Joe Musgrove, the best spot you possibly can in terms of runs created for him on that side of it. Only a 22.4% K percentage. So it's not like they strike out a bunch against righties as a team. So maybe there's some viability against the most popular pitcher in going to Colorado, but the three-run implied team total is just absurd. How do you treat Colorado on this slate?
Large field, top-heavy stuff. I'll get to some Rockies as long as Musgrove's ownership stays where it is, just because, I mean, it's still baseball. Like, even look at last night. Like, Andrew Heaney was fine, but you still had a really low-owned Rockies team score 7 runs or something. It obviously can happen where Musgrove doesn't get quite as many strikeouts as Heaney, and you get a similar game. And it's only a 5-game slate, too, so the opportunity cost to go into the Rockies isn't as high. So I'll get to them in large field stuff if Musgrove is that popular. Smaller field stuff, 3 max, I would rather just be going to like Toronto, Boston, Oakland. I think Oakland or Colorado is just a little bit too far off the board for me in 3 max. But large field stuff, I like the leverage just because Musgrove's so popular. We mentioned it earlier, but if I have to choose between going to Pittsburgh against Peralta or Colorado against Musgrove, I'm leaning the Colorado side because I don't think Musgrove's as good as Peralta. I think he has more question marks. And I think that the ownership on Musgrove is higher.
Right. And the San Diego bats, Adam Frazier in there, left on left, probably going to be leading off, but Tatis, Machado, those are the two guys who are getting crazy ownership, probably rightfully so. They just crushed the baseball, specifically against lefties, both sides really, but north of 54% hard hit percentages, a 629 for Fernando, X slugging for Fernando Tatis. Just retreat San Diego today.
I think they look good. A little bit overowned. Like, if people are going to pay up, or if like the vast majority of the people paying up are going to pay up for the Padres so they can get Tatis and get Machado, then I'd still just rather be going to, Oakland, Boston, Toronto as my pay up spots. But I'm not, I'm not opposed to going to the Rockies or to the Padres. Freeland this year, 202 expected ISO to righties. That's a pretty big number for him. In the past, he's done a decent job at limiting power, but that hasn't really been the case this year. Of course, you have a lot of it in Tatis and Machado, but also you have Pham, who has power from the right side. Austin Nola could be a relatively cheap catcher option as well. But again, keep in mind there could be moving pieces with this team also, depending on what happens at the, with trades as the day goes on.
So Jets World asked earlier, I promised him I would get back to him here in the premium Slack. That's where you want to put all your questions. We get to those first every single time. But Jets World said, playing the 777 tonight on DK, do you prefer Toronto bats or San Diego bats? Safe to assume Toronto. Yeah,
yep.
Toronto. Right?
Yep, Toronto.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, so there you go. We're both in the camp Toronto here tonight. I also just love getting to Oakland now with the addition of Starling Marte into that lineup. I don't think other people are going to go to that as much as what they're going to be going to San Diego. And for sure, these Detroit stacks are just off the chain. If Detroit goes off, which they're inevitably going to score 17 more runs tonight now that I'm going to be lower on them, but such is baseball in the year of our Lord 2021. Adam, we did it. 5 games. We made it the full hour. We didn't run out of anything to talk about, but any final thoughts here for the people?
Josh Engelman thinks that the Wizards are better with Kyle Kuzma, KCP, and Montrezl Harrell than Russell Westbrook. Just maybe the dumbest take I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, my God. That's fantastic. I'm excited to talk to him and Lofty. Make sure you guys are checking out that show. They're doing the NBA draft show. I believe that's starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Is that correct, Jordan Klein? Is he listening to me? Jordan Klein has no idea. We do.
Well, while you're waiting for him, one more thing. Tarp is on the field in Boston, which makes no sense and makes things kind of scary.
Oh, that's really, really freaky considering we just talked about everything we love there. The NBA Draft Watch Along is what we're going to be calling that. That is on the Odds channel. If you're not subscribed to that, definitely do that here. Sponsored by a different person that is not Jock Market. We love Jock Market though, so we're going to stick with them here. But Lofty, Josh, we're going to have a rotating panel. I might show up once or twice. Who knows? We'll see what happens with that. But that'll be this evening. Looking forward to that. Yes, as I said, that is starting at 7:45 p.m. Eastern time. But before that, check out right after us right now on Live Before Lock. We've got one Greg. We've got one Terry McBride. Excited to be watching them. You should be as well. I'm Eric Lindquist. He's Adam Scherer. We're out of here. Best of luck.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on today. First of all, I mean, we've got this baseball slate, which I think it's a fun slate. There's a lot to make of it. But in addition to that, we've got baseball trades happening. The NBA draft is tonight, so there's NBA trades happening. And so not only are we doing the regular baseball show, so, usually this would just be the end of the road for content today. But coming up after us, we're going to be having an NBA draft reaction. I don't even know what we're calling it, but an NBA draft show. Lofty and Josh are going to be on. We're going to have other guests popping in and out. That's going to be at 7:30 over on the Awesemo Odds channel. So they'll be reacting to any kind of bets they like, everything that happens in the NBA draft and all these trades going on. But Terry, what piques your interest the most today? Is it the basketball trades, the baseball trades, this baseball slate? What's going through your mind?
We would probably have to go NBA draft 1, baseball trade deadline 2, this slate like 6 or 7 after dinner, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually going really light tonight. Decision I made when I woke up this morning, just wasn't feeling myself and decided to go a little light, but covered the slate top to bottom and I've been engaged with it all day. So despite not playing, I'm into it. Psyched about the draft. I love draft night. It's one of the more fun NBA nights just in general, especially when we get a lot of action, which it looks like we're going to have this year. Hoping my Knicks do something interesting. I really want to thank the Wizards for trading Russell Westbrook and hopefully securing that Bradley Beal trade demand on behalf of my Knicks. That's hopefully a good thing that'll be coming soon. So yeah, a lot of interesting parts. We had the Joey Gallo acquisition by my Yankees yesterday that I loved. I had the exact opposite reaction that Eric Lindquist had when they traded away Nelson Cruz on the air. I was jumping for joy with Joey Gallo coming to the Bronx. That's the guy I've been calling for. Perfect acquisition for my team. So yeah, it's an interesting, fun couple of days of sports, man.
That is going to be a lot of home runs to right field for Joey Gallo. I know a lot of people are looking at him like, oh my God, the low batting average, which I mean, batting average, not really all that important of a stat now with the current information we know about baseball. The other thing too is just that short porch and right, I think is just perfectly set up for Joey Gallo. Did you see that picture of him standing next to Jason Giambi, where he makes Giambi look like just a little person? Like he is towering over Jason Giambi, which is pretty hard to do. Jason Giambi, obviously, this isn't Jason Giambi just juiced to the tits or anything like that, but still, it's still a pretty big dude in Jason Giambi. But absolutely. Yeah, I expect that's going to be a pretty big boost to the Yankees offense. Now, not official yet, but Max Scherzer, it appears, is going to be headed to the Padres. Now, I'm just going to ask you just quick kind of reaction is, assuming he goes to the Padres and just giving up kind of, pieces in terms of prospects and whatnot, not anything that's currently valuable to the major league roster, which I think is what we would expect. Would that make the Padres the favorite to win the World Series this year?
I would have to think so. I mean, they're just going to be so absolutely loaded from top to bottom. That pitching staff is going to be deadly in a short series and in the first round, and then getting into just a full 7-game series. When you can talk about Max Scherzer, Yu Darvish, some combination of Blake Snell, Joe Musgrove, Chris Paddock, Dinelson Lamet, if he gets healthy in there, I mean, they are just, it's an embarrassment of riches in that rotation. And the team is good. The bullpen is very good. I would expect they might make a couple additional upgrades in the bullpen if they can find them. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lights out team. Very tough out in the playoffs, if not favored for the series.
Yeah, and I have this actually I don't even think is really a strong take, but kind of an interesting. Blake Snell's been terrible this year. I kind of wonder if he could recapture a little bit of magic and move into the bullpen for the playoffs. I think that could be a perfect role for Blake Snell right now, just something to mix it up. They're gonna have so much depth in the rotation. And I just don't think the way he's pitching, there'd be any need to use him as a start in the playoffs. But, maybe if you use him as a guy who pitches an inning at a time with his stuff, that could really work out. So that's just kind of a different angle I was thinking about earlier that I didn't really see get mentioned anywhere. But
let's talk about, and we've seen that role be just super valuable in the playoffs in short series when you can, there's another tornado warning coming through. I can't mute that. Sorry. So like I was saying, we've seen that be super valuable when you can cut a game down to a 6-inning game, a 7-inning game by just having a dominant bullpen in a playoff series. It's a major advantage. The Yankees used to make their bones and win championships by doing that with Mo Rivera in the back of the pen. I mean, it's a really, really good formula for winning baseball games. So I agree. I think that's an interesting thing that they could do with him, and it would give that bullpen a little bit more depth, a little bit more firepower.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm hoping. I think that's something that could maybe revitalize Blake Snell's career. And also, I think, isn't everybody kind of a Padres fan at this point? Like, even if unless you're maybe like a Dodgers fan or whatever, but I feel like everybody, their second or third favorite team, everybody kind of likes the Padres at this point. So I wouldn't mind seeing them win this year at all. Yeah, definitely a fun team. Yeah. Fernando Tatis, one of my favorite players. So we just brought up it's dark here. There's no lighting, like basically anywhere here by me or you. Tornado warnings everywhere. It looks like it's potentially about to rain. So now talking about this baseball slate, I think the place where we should start, how are you handling the weather for the Red Sox Blue Jays game? It does look like the ownership is starting to dip a little bit here, which I think could be a result of the weather. I haven't taken players out of my player pool yet, but I'm keeping an eye on it. It's a little bit of a concern. I know we aren't that close to Boston, but I'm not super comfortable with weather either.
Yeah, and just looking at some of the sites, looking at the radar, looking at Dark Sky, and taking a look at their pretty accurate, reliable weather grid, it's just a big block of rain all the way through. It's light rain up until like midnight, but we've seen a lot of teams scrap for light rain. It's a divisional opponent. It's an easy enough game to drop. I feel like these teams have been playing each other for like 2 straight weeks now and have like 5 canceled games, but it could be headed that route. I'd be really concerned. I actually was somewhat intrigued by Eduardo Rodriguez just as like a low-owned dice roll because I think he's a talented guy who's pitching better than it seems like he's pitching. I didn't like the matchup by any means, but I think if I were making 150 lineups, I'd probably be limiting at the very least significantly my exposure to either pitcher while maybe letting the bats creep in around the edges for now and then having a pivot plan in case this game scratches. So maybe run 2 sets of crunches, one with this game in for bats, one with it out completely, and then just be ready to drop whichever one in becomes relevant.
Yeah, right now I'm planning on running it. And the other thing too is I'm going to refresh some of our ownership data right now. But I mean, like right now, if you look at it, we have the Blue Jays and the Red Sox as 2 of the more under-owned stacks on the slate. Then if you go to our pitchers tool, we have Eduardo Rodriguez as one of the most under-owned pitchers today. So, right now it just looks like a good GPP spot. People are not on about Hunjin or nobody's on him either. So, I think the pitching options are pretty thin today. Offense is very chalky, and it looks like it could be a place to differentiate. Right now, it's in my player pool. If I have to make a change, then we'll talk about that later as we go on. Right now, in terms of weather report, what I'm looking at here, looks like about a 30 to 40% chance of rain throughout the game. Doesn't look like heavy rain, though, light rain. So potentially something they could play through. But once again, something we're going to need more information on. What are you seeing in terms of weather from what you're looking at?
Yeah, and I think they were saying on the last show that the tarp is actually on the field. So they're not out there warming up or anything like that. So it's coming, if it's coming down or if it's not coming down already, there's a big block of rain coming with no real break. And they've already got the tarp on the field. It's a bad recipe for what we've seen where games do get scrapped. That said, like you were just pointing out, it's a spectacular GPP spot because of it. It's the kind of situation where, like, I just wish I knew somebody in the Red Sox clubhouse that I could send a text to and just be like, hey, man, you playing tonight? Because if you can get any kind of edge, or if you want to just roll the dice and say, I think this game is playing, then you can pick up a pretty decent amount of leverage and a good spot on one of the best offenses in baseball, or two of the best offenses in baseball, really the top of the board and positively leveraged across the industry. I mean, it's a really, really dynamite spot for the bats. So I'd be looking to do that. Like I said, I would be crunching with them in right now, but I would have a plan for that game to scrap. And probably the best way to approach it is to just make that decision. Just say, like, all right, I'm playing this. I'm going to approach this slate as if this game is playing or is not playing, and build your lineups that way and just make a confident decision, and then be ready with a plan to pivot off of that in case of emergency at the very end.
Yeah, and so the other thing, too, is if we have anybody in the YouTube chat that lives over in the Boston area, remember we were doing that show together where there was rain. I'm pretty sure it was an Atlanta game. Was it Atlanta where we found out that like 80% of the people watched the show all lived in or around Atlanta, and they were all telling us what the weather report was in certain suburbs? Anybody who lives in the Boston area, look out the window and tell us what's going on, because that is the way that Terry and I really like to do our weather for Yankees and Mets games. We
Absolutely.
look outside and we figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
but
just
yeah,
do the if I had tickets test. If I had tickets, would I be going to this game right now? I love doing that.
the old window test for me right now, though, just to reiterate, I am leaving it in. I'm just looking at what our data is on the site, and assuming the game is playing, that is how I'm going about approaching it. If I have to change that during the show, I will definitely make an announcement that I'm doing so. But for now, let's talk about some of these pitchers. And also, I have my eye on Twitter just for any kind of baseball news, basketball news, anything that happens, anything of interest that happens. Terry and I could break it down. And if there's anything I'm going to bet on, I'll also bring that up. But whether it pertains to baseball, the NBA draft, I have betting apps open on my phone, and I'm ready to place some wagers during the show. But let's jump into the pitchers right now, because that's where we always start. But pitching at the high end, my overall favorite option on the slate is Freddy Peralta. I'm a pretty big Freddy Peralta guy. I've rostered him a whole bunch this year. The only one concern I have here with Freddy Peralta, he is popular, but actually I don't really care about that, because there's a lot of really popular pitchers on slate, and he's not as popular as somebody like Joe Musgrove. So I'm paying up for somebody. I do prefer paying up for Freddy Peralta. Is that he only pitched 4 innings last time out. He did come out with the bases loaded. It was a favorable hitting situation. But they did say after the game, Craig Counsell said they just wanted to limit his pitch count to keep him fresh. So a couple of questions. Number one, do you mind the ownership going to Freddy Peralta? And then number two, how concerned are you with how early he came out last game?
I'd be more concerned about the latter, about just the idea that they might be limiting pitch count and just trying to give him some spots where they can grab a few innings, claw a few innings back from his overall total. That said, he's a spectacular option in this spot against this team. I think the price is right. Only 9,700 on FanDuel is probably a little cheap. 10,000 on DK, probably a little cheap relative to some of the salaries we see for other pitchers who are honestly not pitching as well as he is across other slates. So I think he's in the right spot. If the ownership is tough to swallow at 53% on DK, 24% on FanDuel, but I think on such a short slate with only really a few quality options before you get into major dice rolls, I think you just kind of have to play the chalky pitchers on this slate and just kind of roll with it, particularly if we lose that Ryu and Rodriguez spot, because then you're taking 2 more of the potentially quality options off the board, and then you're really just making it a 3-man pitching slate between Peralta, Musgrove, and Montas. So I think he has to be played. He's been spectacular. 102 innings pitched over 18 starts, 35% strikeout rate, 0.89 whip. 11.5% walks is too many walks. He needs to be more efficient with that, but it doesn't burn him. He's been just spectacular all season long. I think even if he pitches, let's say 5 innings against this Pirates team, he's very likely to hold them down, not get dinged by them. And they've been good for the season in the aggregate at not striking out, but the confirmed lineup overall, 24.3% average strikeout rate. So there are some strikeouts in this lineup. I think he could go 5 innings and still carve up this lineup for a pretty relevant DFS score here. So I think you do need to play him and just kind of, not really sweat the innings that much. It's a concern, but I think we just kind of have to roll with it.
He's my most roster player on the slate. I just don't really see a way around it. Like points per dollar, I think you can make a case that Joe Musgrove is a better play, but there is such an insane amount of ownership going to Joe Musgrove today. If you look at our top pitchers tool over at Awesemo, which is free to use today, and I'm just going to refresh to make sure this is the most recent information. He is, so refresh, 71.8% projected ownership on DK, over on FanDuel projected for 48.4%. You just get to what you have to pay up for somebody. And given those ownerships, I prefer Freddy Peralta to Joe Musgrove, even though Joe Musgrove is my second most rostered pitcher today. And then, the other option is Frankie Montas in Los Angeles. And then we have Eduardo Rodriguez and Hyun-Jin Ryu in that Boston game, which number one is a favorable hitting situation anyway. The wind is going to be blowing out, assuming it plays, and there's a little bit of weather risk. So to me, Freddie Peralta just kind of by default becomes my top overall pitching play on the slate. I think he's the safest option of anybody there, and I think he's the option with the highest ceiling. So I don't mind the ownership too much, and it is kind of nice, at least on FanDuel. He does have half the ownership projected of Joe Musgrove right now. On DK, once again, he's still 20% less owned than Joe Musgrove. So I think that's where we have to pivot next is, what do we do with Joe Musgrove? It's clearly a great spot against the Rockies. Pitching is terrible today. The price point is right. But he's ridiculously popular. He's going to be about 3/4 of the lineups today on DK. He's going to be about half the lineups today on FanDuel. And Joe Musgrove has been terrible over the last 6 weeks. So there's so many things that are pulling me in different directions. In the build that I have right now, I'm getting to about 40% Joe Musgrove. It's a healthy amount, but it's still at 40% Joe Musgrove. That's somehow almost half of what the field has. I tend to think that ownership has to go down a little bit, I would think, by the time we get to lock. I just can't imagine he's going to be like over 80% owned or anything like that. But if this is the true number, I have to be underweight to it just based on my process. Clearly, it's a good spot for Joe Musgrove. I play him in cash games considering the ownership and the price point. Tournaments, once again, my second most rostered pitcher. I'm just under the field on him.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where I'd be coming down across a full slate of lineups. I'd be very happy to spread out some of that ownership, come down at, if he's 50% on FanDuel, come down at half that. You're still getting 25% of your lineups with Joe Musgrove in it. So if he hits that upside score, you're certainly not dead by any means, but you're getting away from half the ownership that's on him. Spread it around to some of these other options. Not like we've got a ton of quality, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that, say, Casey Mize has a usable start at 6,900 on both sites. Ryu and Rodriguez certainly could, if that game goes. Each one of them is capable of shutting down that other team despite the favorable hitting conditions. It definitely projects better for offense. Those guys are pushed down toward the bottom of my board, but they're capable starters. There are guys who, deserve at least a few shares. So I think it just makes sense to start peeling away some of the Musgrove, just given that ownership, that insanely high ownership. I do like him. He's a pitcher that I was really excited about coming into the year. He was delivering like crazy all year long. Everybody points to the sticky stuff crackdown in June. And what really happened is I traded for Joe Musgrove in our Dynasty League. And since then is when he's actually been bad. So it's actually my fault. It's not the sticky stuff. His spin rate's actually been pretty steady throughout. He's just pitching poorly because he's doing it for me now on the books. But I like the upside here. I think it's a very good spot for him in general. They talked about it on the last show. It's for the active roster for the opposing Rockies, a 71 WRC plus, 29% worse than average creating runs against right-handed pitching. The next worst team in the league is at 82. So, they are significantly worse than the average in creating runs. They don't hit for power. They're okay at avoiding the strikeouts. 23.2% strikeout rate is in the top half of the league, but everything else, 2.67% home run rate, a 143 collective ISO. Musgrove should carve this team up. Will he? I don't know. Will I ride with that much of the field to find out? No. I'd rather let the field have it. If he does go off and have a crazy, crazy score, I'll have, like I said, probably about half of it, and I think I'd be comfortable with that.
When do you think is the last time, maybe you might not even have to guess, you might have the information in front of you. What do you think is the last time Joe Musgrove scored over 20 DraftKings points?
End of May.
May 25th. May 25th against the Brewers, he scored 20.1 DraftKings points. Overall, since April 19th, he has scored over 21 DraftKings points once. That was a start at home against the Rockies, but that was also before the banned substances came into play. So, he's been okay as of late. Actually, that's not even true. He hasn't even been really that okay, but he's had some okay starts. He scored 17.3 DraftKings points his last time out. That was against Miami. But some other recent starts, 1 fantasy point against the Nationals, 4 against the Nationals, 4 against the Reds. He hasn't pitched all that well recently, and by default, I feel like I have to get to him some. I'm just not getting to as much as the field does. Based on our ownership, it's just a crazy amount of play getting to him right now. But now we've talked about how popular Freddy Peralta and Joe Musgrove is. I know you expressed your concerns about the weather in Boston as it relates to Erod and Hyun-Jin Ryu. But now that we've seen all this ownership going to Musgrove, we're just kind of desperate looking for places to pivot off of him. Does this make you inclined to maybe risk it with the weather a little bit more to get to Erod or Ryu?
Yeah, I think I would at least consider it. And it's something where you'd just be kind of running right up to lock with whether or not you roll with those decisions. I'm usually less inclined to play pitchers in a risky situation like that. But just with the slate that's fairly empty on options, I think it makes sense to at least keep them in consideration and maybe build some lineups that way so that you can toss them in if they pull the tarp or if we get an announcement that, this game's going to start at 8:30 or something like that. Both pitchers pretty fairly priced. Rodriguez in particular, 7,600 on the FanDuel slate, 8,800 on the DK slate, I think is very nicely priced. Nicely owned, only 11% on DK, 6.5 on FanDuel. 96 and a third innings pitched over 19 starts. He's got a 27.4% strikeout rate. I know the ERA is up over 5, but his xFIP is at 3.34. His xERA was in the 3s. He's pitched a lot better under the covers. He's gotten dinged by some bad BABIP numbers and just some bad luck. Overall, he's pitching pretty well. Puts too many guys on base given the batting average on balls in play. He's got a 1.35 whip, but only a 5.8% walk rate. So there's a lot to like about what he does individually, despite what the Sox have backed him up with defensively. 7.7% barrel ball rate is trending up a little bit higher than you'd like to see, but a 35.5% hard hit rate is fine. Does a decent job keeping the ball down and limiting run creation against. So I would like the Erod side of this, I think, a little bit more, despite the fact that he's going into a Blue Jays lineup that is very good against left-handed pitching. They strike out 21.8% of the time, create runs 7% better than average. 4.07% home run rate is in the top third of baseball, 181 collective ISO, same story. So they hit lefties well, and that's why you're not getting a ton of attention on him in addition to the weather, is it's not a great spot. But if I was picking between the two, I think it would be Erod for me going up against the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I'm a little higher on Erod also. Once again, I'm a lot more tentative about the pitchers in this game than I am the hitters. The reason being is just with the weather looking like it's not going to be crazy, terrible rain, except just the chance of it raining on and off. How many times have we seen baseball games where, and by the way, it's something that happened with Freddie Peralta earlier in the year in Burnaby. How many times have we seen spots where it rains on and off during the game goes into delay, they come out of a delay, and the hitters will stay in the game, the starting hitters, but the pitchers will come out. So that's why it's something that's a little bit of a concern for me with the pitchers. But the reason I have more exposure to Erod than I do Ryu, and I'm not very high on either of these pitchers. I do think that they're both going a little bit under-owned, but I still prefer the offenses. But Erod this year, he's way underperformed his peripheral numbers. He has a 5.23 ERA, but he's a 3.65 expected ERA, 3.51 FIP. If you look at some of these underlying numbers, his strikeout rate's been good this year. He's just been killed by a 355 BABIP and a 658 left on base percentage. So he's getting done in by really bad sequencing and a lot of balls that are just being put in play that are leading to hits that normally wouldn't be. So all stuff that I expect to regress and come back to the norm. So Erod, if I have to pick one of them, it's going to be him. But once again, I'm not super high on either of the pitchers in this spot.
Yeah, totally agreed. Ryu on the other side he's been better in the past than he's been this year so far, 19.9% strikeout rate. He does give you innings, 110 innings in 19 starts, but he's walking 5.6% is fine. 8.1% barrel balls is a little bit more than you'd like to see. 41.3% hard hit rate, 89.3 average exit velocity. So it's giving up a little bit of quality contact and not enough strikeouts. So the sequential hitting is there. The run creation opportunity is there on the other side. And just not a guy who can limit that by sitting down hitters. Only induces 9.6% swinging strikes, 28.1% CSW percentage. So just not the pitcher that Erod is at this point in this season anyway. So I do, in other situations, I have gotten to Ryu and succeeded, but I don't think this is the spot for him. Even in a sunny, nice weather day, I don't know how much Ryu I'd be getting here.
It's a tough offense. He's not generating all that many strikeouts this year. So, yeah, I agree based on that. Also, the price point's pretty high. At least Erod offers a little bit of salary savings on FanDuel at the very least. And then DK, we have to roster two pitchers. If we're looking to pivot off Musgrove, it's sensible. Once again, I have a single-digit ownership to Erod right now. Not a real significant investment for me. Just want to bring it up. We've got a small slate trying to cover all the bases. And also, if you guys have questions, feel free to fire those in because we could address all those. We're definitely going to have the time today. And we do have Paul Ekizi. I probably pronounced your name incorrectly, but what happens if he has a headache again? Yeah, that would probably suck. That definitely killed me the other time when he got a headache and had to leave the game. But I mean, once again, I don't have all that much exposure to him today. I just think that there's a case to be made that he's going under owned. But here's somebody that's getting a little bit of chatter right now in the YouTube chat. What do you make of Chad Kuhl today? So Chad Kuhl is somebody who not a particularly good big league pitcher, but he's reasonably priced and he has produced good results as of late. So I think it's 6 starts in a row for Chad Kuhl where he scored double-digit DK points. He also is at a salary range that's viable as an SP2. There are cheap pitching options that I prefer to Chad Kuhl that I have a feeling people are going to get mad at me about for liking. But with that in mind, Chad Kuhl, viable, but I have other options I prefer.
Yeah, I think that's similar to me. We know that this Milwaukee lineup has strikeouts in it, which is the one thing, 25.3% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching this season for them. So there's some opportunity there, but we're talking about a guy in 61 2/3 innings over 13 starts. He's got a 19.9% strikeout rate. He's walking 12.8% of hitters, 5.13 xFIP, 10.5% swinging strikes induced. He yields a 5.8% barrel ball rate. So all of that kind of comes together in a pretty decent hitting profile for creating runs for sequential hitting. The hard hit is not terrible, 35.1% hard hit to go with that 5.8% barrels, 87.9 mile an hour average exit velo. So it's not significant like home run power, but he's definitely giving up some sequential hitting opportunities here. I don't love the spot, but I do think on a slate like this, he's at least viable. Given that he's 8,200 on FanDuel, I don't know how much I'd be getting to him over there against versus some of these similarly priced options that are clearly a lot better despite the ownership. But I do think he's interesting. 6,400 on DK, only 13.8% owned. That's probably too low. I think you could easily push up over that as your SP2 option and maybe just attack the field in a different kind of an angle here. I don't know how much I'd put him together with Peralta just for the idea that you're sacrificing the win equity, but I also don't know how much he's necessarily got. Like, I don't think that the Pirates are going to win this game, regardless of how well he pitches. So maybe you can get away with that, and then you're putting together a really unique combination of pitchers. You've got a decent amount of money to spend, and you can get to some of those pricey bats. So he's at least got utility on this slate, if not significant upside.
Yeah, and he also offers a little bit of leverage, right? Because if you look at our top stacks tool, we do have the Brewers going a little bit over-owned. I didn't really have enough Chad Kuhl. I think I'm going to bump him up a little bit so that I get some more of him. But all right, are you ready to upset people?
Absolutely, always.
Okay, I kind of like Alexander Wells as a GPP play today for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's cheap. Most importantly, he's 5,200 on DraftKings, and I think there's a case to be made on this slate that a lot of these pitchers are just not going to perform well, and you could get into a situation where just the cheapest guy on the slate who doesn't suck ends up making the optimal lineup, right? If we have one of these expensive offenses that goes off and maybe you get 9-10 fantasy points from Alex Wells, that could be enough. The other thing too is he's a reliever who's being stretched out, but his last outing, he threw 92 pitches, I'm pretty sure was the number. Double checking to make sure that's accurate. But yeah, 93 pitches last time out against the Tampa Bay Rays. He ended up going 5 2/3 innings, struck out 7 hitters, only 2 walks, very limited sample size and limited amount of data on Alexander Wells at the big league level. We've only seen him throw 10 innings this year. That's all of his pitches totally across the big league level. Doesn't have great strikeout stuff, but he's cheap enough where I'm just kind of hoping that okay, if he could survive against the Tigers, he enables me on a different lineup build than everybody. He's only projected for 1% ownership right now. That and the Tigers are so ridiculously popular yet again today. We have the Tigers today projected for over 20% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, we have the Tigers projected for, it doesn't matter because on FanDuel, I'm not considering Wells anyway, but we have the Tigers projected for 17% ownership on FanDuel. But just considering all the ownership that's going to him on DK, I like the leverage I'm getting from Wells. I have him in 15% of my lineups right now, which is 15x more than the field. I like the leverage he offers. I like the price point, and I just don't like the pitching today.
Yeah, I'm with you. As a DK play, I think it works, especially if you can rely on or at least point to the idea that he could have an extended outing with that many pitches the last time around. I think that's totally viable, and you're throwing him into a Tigers lineup that is 4th worst in baseball, 25.5% strikeout rate against lefties. They've created runs okay. They're up to a 104 collective WRC plus, a 4% better than average, but they're still below par in home run rate, 3.53% home run rate in the split, 157 collective ISO. So I think there's an angle where he could have a decent start if he gives us 5 innings, 6 innings, something like that. Whether or not he pitches to extreme upside for strikeouts against this heavy strikeout lineup is certainly a question. He's more a control command kind of a guy. Never had an extended strikeout rate through his brief minor league career, all under or around 20%. So a little below average, even through the minors, even through like low A. So he's not a big time strikeout guy, but he did have a nice strikeout game the last time out. So it's there. He's got very well graded command. So he's at least going to be around the zone. And he's a kid who's not likely to give you too many free passes. I know in 10 and a third innings, he's got a 12.8% walk rate in the show. But over the course of his minor league career, he's been in low single digits throughout his career. So we have to expect that for a kid who's graded so well for command and control and who has demonstrated an ability to not walk guys, he's at least going to limit the opportunity here, most likely for the Tigers. And for me, yeah, I've been railing against going to the Tigers when they're this heavily owned all along. This is more the kind of profile pitcher that you would want to do it against. So their ownership makes a little bit more sense to me today. But I certainly wouldn't be rostering Tigers, and I think you could use them to attack the field. I think that's a good plan.
All right, so I'm happy I got your stamp of approval. It's most likely to go poorly anyway, but this is one of those spots like, hey, so like yesterday, but I was my most stacked team yesterday. I don't presume you listen to the show. It was the Colorado Rockies yesterday against a really chalky Andrew Heaney. Did I expect it to go well? More often than not, no. But over the course of the season, I thought his situation went well. Yesterday, it did happen to go well. And this is kind of a similar spot. Yesterday, what the Colorado Rockies were to me is what Taylor Wells is today. So Wells is my favorite cheap pitcher on the slate now. We have other breaking news here. Did you see the trade that just happened?
No. What do we get?
All right. Anthony Rizzo is getting traded to the New York Yankees, Terry.
Yes! That was my other guy. Oh, I'm so happy.
All right.
That
so number one, your emotion. Don't stand up, right? We don't want to see what's going on underneath the table. But your initial thoughts, Anthony Rizzo to the Yankees. How do you think this improves their playoff chances?
Look, they're obviously going for it. So now we need to find another arm out there. I know they're hopefully getting Kluber back. They might get Sevy back at some point if he ever decides to be healthy again. They've got some arms coming, but I think they do need to go out there and find a starting pitcher, a decent high caliber one. It's not going to be Max, but maybe it's Barrios, somebody like that. I just love that the Yankees have a left-handed first baseman again and two lefty power bats in the lineup. Oh my God, what a good addition. Thank you, Brian Cashman. Finally woke up to the idea of lefties in Yankee Stadium. Holy hell.
It is. Listen, I mean, some of these guys they're adding, Anthony Rizzo now, Joey Gallo, that's a lot of damage that could be done at Yankee Stadium. But now, what do you think happens with Luke Voit? Voit has hit extremely well for the Yankees over the last couple of years. Obviously, that could be irrelevant because Luke Voit has been hurt, although I think he's on a rehab assignment, was fairly close to returning. But, Luke Voit this year, he did only have a 97 WRC plus. I'm pulling up his numbers, only 122 plate appearances. The last 3 years, though, Luke Voit, 152 WRC plus, 125 WRC plus, then 2018, 188 WRC plus. So I thought Voit has been somebody who's played really well and has probably been a little bit undervalued. The Yankees have been paying him almost nothing. Do you really think this is that significant of an upgrade getting to Rizzo from Luke Voit? I
do. I think Rizzo's a better first baseman. I think you're just getting more out of Rizzo. Voit to me was always an overrated guy. He was a post-hype kind of a prospect who did profile well for power like early in his prospect career, never really connected until he came to the Bronx. And then he had 700 and change plate appearances where he was just hitting everything for power. He was just absolutely lights out. In 2019, he had 21 home runs across 510 plate appearances. And then last year is really when he came on like a house on fire, 22 home runs and 234 plate appearances with a 333 ISO. But I think what we saw this year in his limited plate appearances is more the player that he really is under the covers. So to me, it's definitely an upgrade. I've never been on the Luke Voit train with all the other Yankee fans, so I'm fine with that. I have higher standards with a lot of these guys. Like I'm not on the Gio Urshela train. I didn't immediately jump to Greg Allen because he stole a base in like his first game, like a bunch of Yankees fans did. There was an article in the Post that was like, Greg Allen is going to save the Yankees season a couple weeks ago. It's like, what? Where are you getting this? But Anthony Rizzo, that's a guy who might come in here and save the season. A combination of Anthony Rizzo and Joey Gallo. Now we're talking. Love it. Two of the premier lefty bats in the game.
Did you see New York legend Mike Francesa's tweet about Greg Allen yesterday?
No, I can only imagine. What did he say?
He thought the Yankees downgraded by going from Greg Allen to Joey Gallo in the outfield. So, what can you do? He's a man who once counted to like 65 live on the air. He was curious how many teams were left in like the NCAA tournament. He just counted all of them. And it was a good like 90 seconds of airtime. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, and he just went for a while. But listen, that aside, that's where the Yankees are right now. And actually, I'm curious because I know one of the sports books has futures odds on teams to make the playoffs. The New York Yankees, where are they currently listed? I have a feeling we might get a biased answer out of you here, but I'm just looking to see if they still have the Yankees listed or if it's come down. Here we go. The Yankees. This is on one of the sites that we typically talk about for DFS that isn't FanDuel. Their sports book here. They have the Yankees listed even odds, -110 to make the playoffs, -110 to miss the playoffs. Try to remove your bias for a second. And which side of that do you think makes for a better bet or would be something that's a stay away?
They are 3 games back of the second wild card, which is the Oakland A's with Seattle in between them. I'm not really worried about Seattle. I like the Marte acquisition for the A's, but I mean, given an overall talent pool, I do think there's a good chance that the Yanks run down the A's, particularly if they get another starting pitcher. Bias removed, I would still, if I'm making the bet, I would bet on the Yankees.
And that's something that is interesting. Oakland has moved to -170 to miss the playoffs. That seems a little aggressive to me. But anyway, let's see. What does FanGraphs
Those don't
have?
line up.
No, that's also something that's kind of interesting. I guess they're just accounting for the chance that either Oakland makes the playoffs, outside chance, maybe the Angels, the Mariners, the Angels, one of them as an outside shot to take a wild card spot. For me, I think it's a bit of a stay away. So right now, FanGraphs has the Yankees with a 45% chance to make the playoffs. And this is before considering the acquisitions and the trades that have happened recently. So I think it's probably close to a 50-50 proposition, -110 on both sides. To me, I think it's probably about a fair line. It'd be something to stay away from. But there we go. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some more trade news that comes in during the show. But pitchers, I think we've pretty much rolled through everybody at this point. Anybody else that we haven't talked about, whether it be Casey Mize, Dylan Bundy, Kyle Freeland, any of them that you think warrant any kind of serious consideration?
If it's any of those guys, for me, it would probably be some shares of Casey Mize. I think the innings question is certainly relevant, although what they had said going into that plan where they started limiting some of his innings was we're going to wind him down going into the All-Star break. Then we're going to bring him back up for the end of through August so that he can pitch in full in August before we shut him down again. So I think that we probably see him he went 4 2/3 his last start, if I'm not mistaken. I think we probably get the 5 and change start, a regular kind of a start here. 20% strikeout rate on the season, over 104 innings, 4.19 xFIP, inducing 9.9% swinging strikes. Gives up too much contact, 9% barrel rate, 41.8% hard hit rate. But if you're looking for a spot that's not any of these guys that we've already talked about, a guy that's not getting any kind of ownership on FanDuel whatsoever at 6,900, I don't think you actually need him there. And not drawing all that much at 11.9% ownership at 6,900, also over on DK. I think he's at least on the board. Maybe you can move him around. And like, if you're going to Chad Kuhl, I would be happy with at least some of those shares to take the savings between Chad Kuhl and Casey Mize and spread it around. Or actually, I'm sorry, Chad Kuhl's less expensive. I would be happy to pay 500 more and grab some shares of Casey Mize and just spread it around between 2 bad pitchers. Let's put it that way.
And by the way, it looks like a lot of people are bringing up in the chat, the tarp is off the field in Fenway. If News God is watching, it would be cool if we could get an update on the weather. I'm just scrolling through our Slack chat to see what's come in terms of weather. It says that at least the last thing that News God posted in the chat, there's a chance of a brief delay in the game, except it doesn't seem like it's all that likely that there's going to be a postponed. With that in mind, and also news that it looks like players are out in the field warming up, tarps are off the field. To me, I think this game's a go for me. I'm leaving it in my player pool, and I don't think that's going to change over the next 30 minutes. Pittsburgh weather, that's something else that's come up a little bit here. That's also something I'm not really concerned about. Slight chance of rain, but it's only 20% chance of rain in Pittsburgh looking at the weather right now. Just considering that information, it's not zero, but it's not enough for me to get off of Freddy Peralta, who I view as the top pitching play on the slate. So, News God saying that he has all the updates in Slack. I was just reading through all those. So, nothing to me. I'm not going to say it's zero weather risk, but it's nothing that's altering my lineup decisions.
Yeah, I think we're getting enough clarity there in specifically in that tweet that he posted from that DFS weatherman on Twitter That guy typically doesn't take that strong a stand unless he's pretty sure. So I think we're at least fairly safe there. So yeah, Tarp coming off the field in Boston, I would drop that back into the player pool if you took it out and fire away. Definitely a good spot for bats, but keep in mind some Erod shares.
All right. And now we can move on over to the stacks, and we could start right off with something we were going to hit anyway, but always nice. We did get a question in Slack chat from Blackbird15. He asked, who are our favorite stacks for FanDuel GPPs today? So I think that is the best place to start. Terry, who is your favorite overall stack today on FanDuel? For me, actually, my favorite stack is the same on FanDuel and DraftKings.
So different answers, right? There's the obvious answers from the site where we're going off the top stacks tool, and Toronto and Boston are toward the top of the list. We've talked about that being a great spot for hitting and for offense. But for me, taking things like leverage into account on the FanDuel slate, taking into account that they rank out very, very similarly overall on the board, I really like the spot for the Oakland A's. The one thing that I'm going to throw into the mix, and it's something that somebody mentioned and that we should definitely call out, is that you do not, unfortunately, get Starling Marte on the FanDuel slate for the A's, but you do get him on DK. He's 5,400, not drawing a ton of ownership. So it really sucks that you don't get him on FanDuel. I don't know why the hell they weren't able to move him over in 2 days since he got traded, but c'est la vie. You get a lot of ownership around Mark Canha and Matt Olson up toward the top of the lineup, but then it really starts deflating fast when you get around Jed Lowry, Ramon Laureano, Mitch Moreland, Matt Chapman, part of the lineup here. So I really like it up and down on the FanDuel side of things, and then mixing Marte back into that lineup on DK just makes it much, much stronger. He's an excellent get by that team. They have Ramon Laureano, and they just basically got another version of Ramon Laureano who's a better hitter and a better on base guy. 305, 405, 451 for Marte this season, 7 home runs, 22 stolen bases. Laureano coming up in the 5 spot in the lineup, 245, 314, 439. He's hit 14 home runs, stolen 11 bases. So, I mean, these guys do a lot of similar things. They're going to be a great combination to have hitting on either side of the power in the middle of the lineup. Really like the acquisition there, and I think you can stack this team at least 1 through 8. I don't need Elvis Andrus off the bottom. If anybody wants to come up with a creative reason to use him in his 235, 276, 312, and 65 WRC plus, only 9 stolen bases because he never gets on base, I'm all ears for why, but I don't think we need him. But everybody else in that lineup I really like.
Yeah, I mean, I am overweight to the field on Oakland. And by the way, if you do look at our top stacks tool, the A's do rate out as one of the most under-owned teams on the slate for DraftKings purposes. On FanDuel, they were also coming in a little bit under-owned. We actually have them. Yeah, now actually the most recent update, the most positively leveraged stack on all of FanDuel is the Oakland A's. Over on DraftKings, though, it is the Toronto Blue Jays. Toronto's my overall favorite stack on the slate, and it's kind of a conflict for me because I've been really high on Eduardo Rodriguez recently, and I still do think in a big way that his underlying numbers should show that there's going to be positive regression for him going forward, and he should be a better pitcher. But still, whenever this Toronto Blue Jays team is going low owned, it's a spot I've consistently been attacking. So it's a weird spot for me where it's 2 of my favorite GPP plays over the last month are colliding. I've been way over the field on Erod over the last month. I've been way over the field on Toronto Blue Jays. And now they're playing against each other, and I'm still leaning towards Toronto. One part of the reason is just because even if it looks like the rain is going to hold off for the game to start, still a chance that it pops up during the game and Erod has to come out. That's not been an issue for the offenses. The other thing, too, is it's just the ownership is so low on Toronto. For DK, for instance, right now I have them project for a 6.6% ownership share compared to a 16.3% chance to be the top stack on the slate. So I really, really like Toronto. The price is a little bit prohibitive. But with that said, there are some crappy, cheaper pitchers I kind of like today, like Taylor Wells. You know, we both said that we like Chad Kuhl a little bit as an SP2 option. What I think the majority of the field is doing, what I know the majority of the field is doing today on DK is they're going to be playing Frankie Montas, Joe Musgrove, and Freddy Peralta, and then just going cheap at offense. Yeah. So as a result, we're seeing the cheaper pitchers are going really low owned, and there is no ownership going to the expensive offenses. So I just think we put ourselves on a totally different lineup build by stacking a team like the Blue Jays. I do like paying up to be contrarian. I think this is a good spot to go to it. And, there's always immense upside in the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, absolutely. They're one of the teams that, like you said, I've been trying to attack every time they appear low owned. I just like getting the good teams when nobody else is there. And it's a spot where this isn't the kind of matchup where you even really have to say despite the matchup. But in a lot of cases, despite a good matchup, I would still get there just because it's such a good offense, because we see bats overcome pitching time and again. And when people aren't there, I think that's the way that you win tournaments. Adam even said it on the last show. It's rare that it's the pitcher that really makes the difference. The pitcher can certainly shoot you in the foot, but a lot of the times you need to be on those right bats, and they need to have the bats go off to help you float up and win one of these tournaments. So both of these teams are teams that I like to get to. The Astros are another one that when they're under-owned in the single digits, despite being super expensive, I really like to find good ways to do that. And I'm happy to hold my nose on some of these pitchers and put them in my lineups, particularly in a year where we've just seen pitching be so volatile and some low-end pitchers do really well in spots, high-end pitchers fail in spots. There's always been the 10 great starts, 10 bad starts. What you do with the 10 starts in the middle determines what kind of pitcher you are, that old baseball adage and everything. That really has been in play extremely this year. It seems more so than any other year. So I'm happy to get to some of these offbeat kind of pitchers like we talked about. And yeah, I think that's the right approach. I'm not saying we want to go out there and roster like a Casey Mize, Chad Kuhl combo and then pay for all the Blue Jays and some other expensive bats, but using one of those guys in conjunction with one of the good pitchers, exactly like you said, just gets you right onto a different build, and you're doing it with some of the best teams in baseball. So I absolutely agree. That's the approach for me.
Yeah, and then the other thing, too, is if you look at the end of the Blue Jays lineup, I do think there are quality hitters in the lineup that are, number one, not expensive, number two, not picking up that much ownership. And it's guys who have been very frequently making into my Toronto stacks over the last month. It is Randall Grichuk, Kevin Biggio, Reese McGuire. Reese McGuire mostly on DK just because he's a catcher, and it's a position I never mind punting. So, just because of that added correlation we get into lineups, Reese McGuire's 3,100 on DK. He hits towards the end of the lineup, but whatever. It's hard to get production out of catcher anyway. Might as well get correlation in the lineup. He's cheap. All these guys, not expensive price tags, all project for 2 to 3% ownership. These are all ways that we can mix these guys in, still make it viable to roster. Hey, maybe I get Bo Bichette, Vlad Jr. in a lineup together because I combine those two with like a Biggio, a Grichuk, or something like that. And then I'm still able to roster, like Freddy Peralta in those lineups. So that's another path that I go down with a lot of my Blue Jays stacks. I don't think that just because I'm stacking this team that I have to get to, Teoscar Hernandez, George Springer, Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, Vlad Jr. Because, there still is the salary cap where it becomes restrictive, but I don't mind getting to these guys at the end of the lineup at all.
Yeah, this is one of the teams that for me particularly plays, 1 through 8 most nights. You don't have Lourdes Gurriel down the bottom of the lineup. He's another one of those guys for me that clicks in frequently with Grichuk, with Kevin Biggio down from the bottom of the lineup. But for DK play, yeah, I'd be on Reese McGuire there, just taking the catcher where you get him in stacks. That's kind of how I would approach catcher on DK. Santiago Espinal is more of a slap hitter, but he's over 133 plate appearances at the worst. He's 315, 361, 419. Creating runs 15% better than average on the small sample. So as a hit tool, get on base kind of a guy to maybe turn the lineup over for you, bring it back around if you're playing Springer and Vlad on the other side of that. He's not entirely out of the question. So yeah, 1 through 9 on DK, you can really get to this team and put them together in fairly unique constructions and offset a lot of salary with that bottom of the order.
Yeah, and then I want to talk about the Tigers. Tigers, once again, mega chalk. But first, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's show. That is JockMart. If you guys are new to JockMarket, we don't have to worry about ownership. We don't have to worry about salary cap. This is a totally different way to play DFS. It's a stock market for fantasy players. So there's basketball, there's baseball. Well, not basketball right now, but there's going to be football later. There's golf going on also. And it's a stock market. There's an IPO period. You bid on the players. And then depending on how they perform is where your payout ends up being at the end of the night. And the players' values go up and down as they produce. You could buy and sell players also after the slate lock. So you're not locked into shares of any one player after it starts. So that's always fun that you could say like, hey, this guy's struggling, but I think he's going to turn it around. So then maybe you could buy low on them. Maybe a guy started really hot, but you think they're going to slow down. You could sell high on them, stuff like that. If you guys are new to JockMarket, head on over to the site or download the JockMarket app, make your first deposit. Use the promo code Awesemo to get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That is JockMarket.com. All right, guys, the thing that we have to talk about now, the Detroit Tigers, because what the hell do we do with this team who has been, they've cooled off a little bit as of late. They did have that 17-run game the other day. But that aside, this has been on the whole of the season a below average offense that's just picking up an insane amount of ownership. So if we look at the Tigers today, I want to refresh to make sure I have the most recent ownership before I say this as fact. But all right, 23% projected ownership on DK as a team for the Tigers. On FanDuel, 18%. The most popular team on both sites. Do you think it's warranted?
No, this team sucks. It's the Tigers. I've talked about it every time. I think you and I have talked about it a couple times recently. Just with this team getting so much ownership, I know they were a little bit hot for a little time, but this is a team full of awful hitters. This is not a good baseball team. This is a team that for the year, like I said before, 25.5% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching on the season. Fourth worst in baseball. 157 team ISO below average. 353 home run rate below average. Yeah, they're creating runs 4% better than average now on the season against left-handed pitching. I get it. They've been better, but there are still major strikeout guys in this lineup and guys who just, they don't hit for enough power to justify their extreme strikeout rates. You've got two guys in the lineup that are over a 200 ISO, with Eric Haas is at a 310, which is enormous and fantastic, especially for a catcher. That's great. 221 for Akil Baddoo in the leadoff spot. Everybody else is, even they're good hitters, 178s, 181s for Scope and Grossman. It's just not a good offense. They're not reliable. And when the entire field is going to be on them, go somewhere else. Go to a good team. Go to the Blue Jays, like we talked about. Go to good bats. It's just never for me when they're this popular. When they're going up against a heavily owned bad pitcher and they're not popular for whatever reason, they remain cheap. That's the time to attack the Tigers.
Yeah, and I could see why people are getting to them. It's a couple of reasons. Number one, they're cheap and people want to pay up for pitching today. Number two, they scored 1 million runs yesterday. And we're kind of getting this funny point with the Tigers too, where they're super popular. They keep failing. And then all of a sudden people kind of start to get off them sometimes. Then they blow up again. They're just like, oh my God, we have to roster the Tigers every day for the next week and try to chase that 17 run game again. Listen, it's baseball. Any team could go off on any given night, but we have to look at the overall odds. And I just don't think the odds of them being the top scoring team are over 20% today. So this is a team I'm going to be very light on relative to the field. We did get a couple of super chats here, and it looks like you and I are on the same page here with the Tigers, which is not that surprising. I think anybody who's kind of like-minded like us will look at some of this data and say that, boy, that's a lot of ownership going to the Detroit Tigers. And I don't think that they should be 3x the ownership of the Toronto Blue Jays basically at any time. But first, Eric Johnson left us a super chat. I did see it, but there's no question there, Eric. So if you have a question, follow up and I'll answer that question. If not, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. And then we have a question from Malcolm Revamp. Thank you for the super chat. He's saying, for catcher and first base on FanDuel/DK. So I guess we'll start with FanDuel because that encompasses both of them together. Who's your favorite overall play at first base /catcher on FanDuel?
Matt Olson.
I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, tremendous home run hitter, having an excellent season. He was my home run pick actually for the day. I wrote up the A's. I mentioned the stack earlier. He's my favorite bat in that Athletics lineup, and he happens to play first base. So that is an easy call for me there. Overall on the season, 285, 372, 584 with a 299 ISO, 27 home runs and 411 plate appearances. Really picked things up in terms of his triple slash overall from his struggles last year. He's turned into a phenomenal hitter overall. 50% hard hit rate on the season, only strikes out 16.1% of the time. So he's not one of these 30% strikeout rate home run type guys. Barrels the ball 14.7% of the time. Significant barrel ball rate. Love everything about Matt Olson.
I don't mind that at all. And then I assume probably similar thoughts for you over on DK with Matt Olson as well.
Yeah, I would. I'd not imagine anybody jumps in there. 5,800. I mean, it makes him a little bit harder to roster, especially if you're trying to put him in combination with some of those Blue Jays bats. But there are ways to get there. Certainly, I don't think anybody else, like based on price, would pop in ahead of him as I'm thinking it through. Anybody for you that would be like in between there, or anybody noteworthy on DK for you at first base?
It's actually kind of funny. I'm getting to a lot of Mitch Moreland in my A's stacks, and that's always a little bit of an issue when you stack Oakland on DK. Different from FanDuel, you could play Moreland and Olsen together, but on DK, it can only be one or the other, where they both have the same positional eligibility. But just because of the price difference between the two, Moreland is almost half the price of Matt Olson. Obviously, Olsen's the better hitter, but it appears just as I was building my lineups, not anything by choice. This is just how it came out in the optimizer that Mitch Moreland's one of my most rostered first basemen. And I think it's just because it ends up being that way because of the price difference between the two and still an overall preference to paying up for pitching today. So very similar thought processes, love the matchup against Dylan Bundy. There's a lot of home run equity there, but Mitch Moreland's just a little bit cheaper. So I assume that you don't have an issue with that since you like Matt Olson. It's probably a lot of the same ideas.
Yep, very much with you. I think one of my favorite slates of the season, you could get Matt Olson, Mitch Moreland, and Seth Brown, who was also a first baseman but had outfield eligibility in the same lineup on FanDuel a few weeks back. That was a fun day. But yeah, it sucks that you can't play both Moreland and Olson on the DK slate. Obviously, Olson is the better hitter, like everything that you just said. But for ownership reasons, for cost reasons, there's a ton of good reasons to roster Mitch Moreland. We know that he's a very good lefty bat against a bad righty pitcher, so it's a good spot for him. He hasn't been great this season overall, but there's still something there in that bat. So on any given slate kind of a basis, absolutely.
By the way, I have been alerted in the YouTube chat. Apparently, EMAC won a GPP today. So first of all, what? EMAC 2024. And listen, I hope that he gets to sleep indoors tonight. That is a big upgrade for EMAC. And congrats on the win there, EMAC 2024, forever and always.
Way to go, EMAC. I wonder if it's Hall of Fame worthy. I wonder if he can finally, after all this time, get inducted into the Awesemo Hall of Fame.
He should. We should have him on the show. We should have him do an induction speech. I think the whole deal. So now catchers, you're going to like my most rostered catcher right now on DK. It is Sean Murphy. So Sean Murphy, all the same reasons that we liked Matt Olson, we liked Mitch Moreland. We're going to like Sean Murphy. Good spot for Oakland. Another catcher that I like, Jordan's coming from the God Mike.
What do we got?
I'll answer his question in a sec. I'm still answering the other question. All right, don't worry. Jordan's got us covered. So the second part of the super chat, favorite catchers. So Sean Murphy is overall my most rostered catcher on DK right now. Second most rostered catcher, Reese McGuire, just fits in correlation with my Blue Jays stack. So what do you make of that combination of Sean Murphy and Reese McGuire? I assume that you're also going to like Sean Murphy.
Yeah, very much so on Sean Murphy. Excellent power bat from later in that lineup. And again, it's just a situation where a lot of the time for DraftKings lineup, since you're required to take a catcher, I would just be taking the catcher that comes along with my stack. But in that situation, you're getting a kid 321 plate appearances, 13 home runs on the season, a 203 ISO. Very, very good power bat. He strikes out too much. Strikes out too much, 24.9% strikeout rate, and doesn't make a ton of contact or get on base all that reliably. But that's not really what they're paying him to do. So I like it as a power bat at catcher. And then, I think McGuire makes a ton of sense just going along with Blue Jays stacks there. Just looking around for any other options. I mean, we've got a lot of low-end catchers hitting at the bottom of the lineups today. What do you think if you were going to like Padres bats? What do you think of getting to some Austin Nola toward the end of the lineup? Only 3,200 on the DK slate. Getting some ownership, though. 2,100 if you wanted to roll the dice with him on FanDuel for no real good reason.
He's a little bit overowned to me, and I think the Padres team as a stack is overowned. So I have San Diego stacks, just not as much as the field. So no real issue with them. And once again, he's going to be my player pool, but I have more exposure to guys like Sean Murphy, and I'm going to get to Reese McGuire a little bit more. It's no real knock against him, just other guys that I'm going to prefer today. Now we can get to
Haas at 30% owned, just cross off two owned.
He's in my player pool, but not as much as the field. And I get why people are getting to him also. I mean, he's actually not even cheap. I was going to say he's on the cheaper side, but that's not the case. He's homered in 2 of his last 3 games. Even the game he didn't homer yesterday, he scored 23 fantasy points. So yeah, I see why the field is getting to him at a pretty high clip. Also, the Tigers are the most popular stack on the slate. So Eric Haas, catcher eligibility, batting 4th by default, that's going to make him popular. But now we could answer Eric Johnson's super chat he left for us before. And now we know what the question is. He'd asked, which 2 pitchers would I roster in the 777 on DK? And would I consider Taylor Wells? So, Alex Wells. So in that contest, I don't think there's a need to go all the way to Alex Wells. Like I played him in 150 max, but if I was playing one lineup, I wouldn't go to Alex Wells there. My preferred pitching combination for single entry in a high dollar tournament would be Freddy Peralta and Frankie Montas. I think Montas, just on an ownership standpoint, makes for a good pivot off of Joe Musgrove. I think they have fairly similar outcomes, but Joe Musgrove, particularly in higher dollar tournaments, is going to carry way more ownership. What's your answer?
Yeah, look, I mean, any combination of those 3 pitchers at the top, Peralta, Musgrove, and Montas, are going to be the most owned combinations in that tournament. So if you wanted to play it as a total, hey, I don't care about the $700 and this is my dice roll, I'm a rich man and I don't care, it's one lineup, then maybe you could put in one of these other guys. And for me, it would probably be as disgusting as it feels. Maybe Chad Kuhl, although Erod, I have to go to Erod in that situation, but I don't like it. So I think I'm with you. I would treat it almost cash game like, where I'm just playing these top end pitchers And I think I would agree. I would make that same just ownership-based pivot, despite the savings that you would get from Musgrove. I just think there would be too much of the field on that Peralta-Musgrove combination. So it would just lead me to Montas. And I don't think I would go for the same reason. I don't think I would drop from Peralta to Musgrove at the SP1. So it would probably be that combination for me as well.
All right. So only a few minutes left here, guys. If you have any questions, fire those in. We'll try to get to them as we finish out here. I'm checking Slack really quickly. But are there any teams that we have not mentioned as a stack do you think are notable for any reason, whether they're going over-owned, under-owned, or should be high priority? So far, the things we've really hammered home, the Blue Jays, good pay-up option to be contrarian today. That is my most rostered stack this slate. Oakland, a team that Terry and I both like a lot. Detroit appears to be pretty wildly over-owned. Any other stacks that stand out to you as either being ones you want to target or ones you might want to be lighter on in the field?
I don't think it would be totally crazy to attack some of the Montas ownership, especially on DK with some Angels bets, since they're going pretty under-owned. You've got Ohtani drawing a ton of ownership, obviously, but he's the best bat in that lineup. You just kind of ride it with the field. Everybody else is in like single digits, not that expensive on DK. You can get Justin Upton for 32, Jared Walsh for 49, David Fletcher up top. David Fletcher has a 0.0 barrel ball rate for the season in 200 some odd batted ball events.
Wait, so he's not barreled a single?
Not a single ball. And all last season, he had
God.
one barrel the season before and one barrel the season before that. I actually went back and checked it because it came up 0.0 in here. I was like, no way that's right, but that's right. So anyway, continuing that lineup, you can get to like Iglesias, who's a little bit underrated as a shortstop option in the middle of the lineup. Brandon Marsh, premium prospect, who is yet to really come on. 36 plate appearances, 219, 306, 313. There's speed and power in that bat, so he's kind of interesting. I just think given the ownership and the focus on Montas, it's an under-owned spot. Might not come through, not the best overall lineup on the slate or, in baseball for upside, but they're not terrible either. So I'd rather go to this team than like, say, I want to attack the Peralta ownership with Pittsburgh. That doesn't make sense. I want to attack the Musgrove ownership with Colorado. That doesn't make sense. So if I'm going after one of the premium pitchers, it's probably with these Angels bats against Montas.
Yeah, that's I think that's interesting. I saw somebody that asked this earlier in the YouTube chat. I can't remember who it was though, so I don't know who to credit for. This came up when we were talking about Joe Musgrove, probably almost an hour ago at this point. Had asked me because I was just talking about Musgrove and being lighter on him. I think a lot of people kind of get a sense for, especially because I've done the live before lock, probably like 75% of the slates this year. I think a lot of people get a sense for how I play some of these slates. So somebody pointed out that this seems like a spot where I would be high on the Rockies stacks. I am not, just because there's other offense that we've so positively leveraged. It would normally be a spot that I wouldn't mind getting to. I just think that it's such a bad offense. And there are other spots that I think are viable as under-owned spots that I didn't feel a need to on this slate. But what would you make of them as potential leverage stack? Because I totally think that Joe Musgrove, like I said, is going over-owned. I do think the Rocks are going a little bit under-owned, but I'd still just rather kind of make my bed with the A's and Blue Jays today.
Yeah, given that we've got so much positive leverage on those teams that are actually good lineups, that are actually filled with good hitters, rather than going to this lousy Rockies team, I do think they have good individuals on this team, but they just don't put runs together well at all in the split at 29% worse than average, like we said, for run creation. So it's just not a good team to attack him with. I do like the theory in a game theory perspective that, that's kind of the spot when you've got that massive an amount of ownership on one pitcher. Yeah, you can attack him with bats. Would I do it in maybe a handful of shares across 150? Sure. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that angle here. You can get to combinations of Brendan Rodgers, Charlie Blackmon, Trevor Story, Ryan McMahon, CJ Cron, those guys easily enough. None of them are expensive. None of them are owned. You do potentially run into the risk that Trevor Story gets traded before this game even starts. That's on the board. So you've got that additional concern in there. So I have a plan. It's not my favorite spot, though. I mean, I think there's more upside for Musgrove. It's probably the more exploitable. Like, I don't think there's any upside for Pittsburgh going up against Freddy Peralta here. I think he's going to carve them up. Even if he comes out of that game early, they go right into that good Milwaukee bullpen. So if you're going to do it, I think it makes more sense to go after Musgrove, but it's just not a spot for me.
Yeah, and listen, across 150 lineups, if you're playing a bunch of them, you could rush the Rockies. I did a very small percentage, but the majority of my exposure today is made up by the Toronto Blue Jays, the Oakland A's. Those are my two most used stacks by a pretty wide margin, and then the Boston Red Sox to a smaller degree. But for a bigger slate, I'm pretty tight on stacks, and the other ones are just teams that I've mixed in, like 2 to 4%. But that's the majority of my lineups today is going to be Toronto, Boston, and Oakland. That is just about going to wrap it up for Terry and I today. If you guys have not done it, first of all, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Terry and I are going to be on all the time. So do us a favor. If you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can see whenever Terry and I are going to be going live. And then also, good luck tonight, guys. And congratulations to EMAC 2024. I hope he buys himself a fancy new league.
Here. Good stuff.